It was a grey and cloudy Tuesday morning. The rain fell softly on the streets of the city. Alice rode her bicycle fast. She did not want to be late. Alice was 21 years old and a university student. She studied history of art, so she loved her part-time job. She worked as a security guard at the City Museum. The museum was a very large, old building. It had tall stone columns and big heavy doors. To Alice, it looked like a castle. She parked her bicycle at the back entrance and shook the rain off her coat. She opened the staff door and walked inside. The air inside the museum was cool and smelled like old paper and floor wax. It was very quiet. The museum did not open to the public for another hour. Alice liked this time the best. She felt like the museum belonged only to her. She went to the locker room and changed into her uniform. It was a simple blue shirt and black trousers. She looked in the mirror. She fixed her hair and put on her badge. It said, Alice, Security. She looked serious. She wanted to do a good job. Alice walked into the main hall. Her footsteps made a loud sound on the shiny marble floor. The hall was full of statues and old vases, but Alice walked past them. She went straight to the Grand Gallery. In the center of the Grand Gallery was the most famous thing in the museum. It was a painting called The Blue Lady. Alice stopped and looked at it. The painting was not very big, but it was beautiful. It showed a woman with sad eyes wearing a long, dark blue dress. The woman in the painting looked like she had a secret. People came from all over the world to see her. It is beautiful, isn't it? A voice said. Alice jumped a little. She turned around. It was Ben. Ben was the IT guy. He took care of the computers and the security cameras. He was a tall, thin young man with glasses. He always looked a little nervous. Hi, Ben, Alice said. Yes, I look at it every morning. It feels special. It is very expensive, Ben said, looking at the security camera on the wall above the painting. Mrs. Sterling worries about it every day. Just then, they heard high heels walking fast. Mrs. Sterling, the museum director, walked into the room. She was a tall woman with grey hair and a sharp face. She wore an expensive suit. She did not smile. Stop talking, Mrs. Sterling said sharply. The museum opens in 10 minutes. Ben, is the camera working? Alice, go to your position at the front door. Yes, Mrs. Sterling, they both said. Alice walked away to the front entrance. She looked back one last time at the painting. The Blue Lady watched her with those sad, mysterious eyes. Alice had a strange feeling in her stomach. The storm outside was getting stronger. It was going to be a long day. The big heavy doors of the museum opened at exactly 9 a.m. Usually, the museum was quiet on Tuesday mornings. But today, the weather was terrible. The rain poured down hard, and the wind blew strongly against the windows. Many people came inside the museum just to escape the storm. Alice stood by the entrance. Her job was to check tickets and tell people the rules. Good morning, Alice said to a tall man with a wet coat. Please leave your umbrella in the basket. And remember, no flash photography near the paintings. The man grunted and walked past her. He did not look happy. Soon, the floor near the entrance was wet and muddy. A short, old man walked slowly across the hall with a mop and a bucket. This was old Henry. He was the museum cleaner. Henry worked here for 40 years, longer than anyone else. He had grey hair and walked with a limp. Messy, very messy, Henry muttered to himself. He looked angry at the wet floor. They bring the dirt in. They have no respect. Alice smiled kindly at him. It is just a little rain, Henry. I can help you later. Henry looked at her with sharp, dark eyes. I don't need help, girl. I know this building. I know every corner. I know secrets you don't know. He squeezed the mop hard and walked away, his keys jingling on his belt. Jingle, jangle. Alice felt a cold shiver. Henry was sometimes strange. By lunchtime, the storm was worse. Thunder crashed loudly outside. The whole building shook a little. The lights in the main hall flickered. They went off for a second, then came back on. Mrs. Sterling ran out of her office. She looked pale. "Ben!" she shouted. "Ben, where are you?" Ben ran into the hall. He held a tablet computer in his hands. "I am here, Mrs. Sterling." "The lights," she said. Her voice was high and nervous. "If the power goes out, the alarm system might fail. The cameras might stop. You must check the generator." "I checked it this morning," Ben said calmly. "Everything is fine. The battery backup is at 100%. Mrs. Sterling did not calm down. She looked at the crowd of tourists. "I don't like this. Too many people. Too much noise. Alice." Alice stood up straight. "Yes, Mrs. Sterling." "Go to the Grand Gallery," the boss ordered. "Stand next to the blue lady. Do not move. Do not let anyone touch it. If the lights flicker again, you guard that painting with your life." "I understand," Alice said. She walked quickly to the Grand Gallery. The room was crowded. People were looking at the painting. Alice stood next to the velvet rope. She looked at the blue lady's face. The woman in the painting looked sadder than usual in the grey light. Outside, the thunder crashed again, louder than before. The afternoon passed slowly. The rain did not stop. It hit the glass roof of the museum like small stones. Alice stood next to the blue lady. Her legs were tired, but she stood tall. She watched the people carefully. Most of them were tourists with cameras and wet umbrellas. They looked at the painting, whispered "wow," and moved away. At 3 p.m., a tour group arrived. The guide was a young woman named Sophie. Sophie had bright red hair and a loud, friendly voice. She was Alice's friend. "And here," Sophie told the group, "is our most famous treasure, the Blue Lady. It was painted 100 years ago. It is worth $10 million. The tourists gasped. "10 million, a woman said. "That is a lot of money." "Yes," Sophie smiled. "But to us, it is priceless. It is the heart of our city." Alice listened to Sophie. She heard this speech many times, but she liked it. However, today she was distracted. She saw a man at the back of the group. The man did not look like a tourist. He wore a long grey raincoat and a grey hat. The hat was pulled down low over his eyes. He did not look at the painting. He looked at the ceiling. Then, he looked at the security camera. Then, he looked at the lock on the window. Alice felt a warning bell in her head. Why is he looking at the window? She thought. The painting is over here. She took a step toward him. "Excuse me, sir," she said politely. "Can I help you?" The man turned quickly. He had a thin face and a small scar on his chin. He looked surprised. "No," he said. His voice was rough. "I'm just looking." "Please look at the painting, not the security cameras," Alice said firmly. She wanted to show him that she was watching. The man smiled, but it was not a nice smile. It was cold. "You are very observant, young lady. Very good security." He turned around and walked away quickly. He disappeared into the crowd of tourists. Alice wanted to follow him, but she could not leave her post. She looked for Ben or Mrs. Sterling, but they were not in the room. Who was that? Sophie asked. The tour group was moving to the next room. "I don't know," Alice said. She felt cold again. "But I don't like him." At 5 p.m., a loud bell rang. Ding, Ding, ding. The museum is now closing, a voice said over the speakers. Please move to the exit. The security guards began to guide people out. Alice watched the door. She looked for the man in the grey hat, but she did not see him leave. Maybe he left earlier, she whispered to herself. Slowly, the museum became empty. The big rooms were silent again. Only the sound of the storm remained. The staff gathered in the main hall. It was time to lock the doors for the night. Alice felt tired, but she was also worried. She had a bad feeling about the night ahead. The heavy wooden doors closed with a loud thud. The museum was now officially closed. The silence returned, but it felt different now. The shadows were longer, and the statues looked like watching ghosts. In the main hall, Mrs. Sterling stood with Alice, Ben, and old Henry. Mrs. Sterling held her phone tightly. She looked very stressed. I have bad news, Mrs. Sterling said. The night guard, Mr. Roberts, cannot come tonight. The roads are flooded because of the storm. His car is stuck. She looked at the group. I need someone to stay tonight. I cannot leave the museum empty. Not with this storm. Not with the power flickering. Ben shook his head. I can't. My mother is sick. I need to go home. Old Henry laughed a dry, scratching laugh. I am too old to chase ghosts in the dark. I am going home to my warm bed. He picked up his bucket and walked toward the staff exit. Good luck, he grumbled. Alice looked at Mrs. Sterling. She saw that her boss was truly afraid. Alice needed extra money for her university books. Also, she was brave. I can stay, Alice said. I don't mind. Mrs. Sterling breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you, Alice. I will pay you double. They walked to the Grand Gallery for the final lockdown. Mrs. Sterling took a small golden key from her pocket. She walked to the wall next to the Blue Lady. She put the key into a switch and turned it. Whir! A heavy metal gate rolled down from the ceiling. It covered the painting completely. Now, nobody could see the Blue Lady. She was safe behind the steel bars. This gate is very strong, Mrs. Sterling said. Ben, is the alarm set? Ben tapped on his tablet. Yes. If anyone touches the gate, the alarm will scream. The police will come in 2 minutes. Good, Mrs. Sterling said. She put on her raincoat. Alice, you have the radio. Do not leave the security room. Watch the cameras. If you see anything at all, call the police immediately. I will, Alice promised. Mrs. Sterling and Ben left through the back door. Alice heard their car engines start and drive away. Now, Alice was alone. She walked to the security room. It was a small room near the entrance. It had a desk, a chair, and a wall full of monitors. On the screens, she could see every room in the museum. They were all grey and empty. Alice sat down and made a cup of tea. She looked at the screen for the Grand Gallery. The metal gate was down. The room was dark. Outside, a flash of lightning lit up the sky. Then thunder. The lights in the security room flickered. Blink, blink. Please, don't go out, Alice whispered to the light bulb. She looked at the monitor again. Did something move in the shadows? She leaned closer to the screen. No, it was nothing. Just her imagination. She took a sip of tea and waited. It was 7 p.m. The long night had just begun. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. It was 11 p.m. Alice was still in the security room. She had finished her tea and was now reading a mystery novel. It was funny, she thought. She was reading a story about a thief in a museum, while she sat in a museum waiting for a thief. She put the book down and looked at the wall of monitors. There were 12 screens. They showed black and white images of the silent rooms. In screen 4, The Egyptian room, the shadows of the mummies looked long and scary. In screen 7, the Grand Gallery, the metal gate was still down. The painting was safe. Everything is fine, Alice said to herself. Her voice sounded small in the empty room. The storm outside was violent. The wind hit the walls of the building. Sometimes, the lights in the room dimmed, then became bright again. At 11:45 p.m., the phone on the desk rang. Ringing. Alice jumped in her chair. Her heart beat fast. She picked up the phone. City Museum security, Alice speaking. Alice, it is Mrs. Sterling, the voice said. I am checking on you. Is everything okay? Yes, Mrs. Sterling. It is very quiet. No problems. Good, the boss said. The storm is very bad near my house. The electricity is out here. I was worried about the museum. Remember, if the power goes out, the backup generator will start in 10 seconds. The alarm system has its own battery. I understand, Alice said. Good night, Alice. Good night. Alice put the phone down. She looked at the clock. Midnight. 12 a.m. Suddenly, the sky outside turned white with lightning. The sound was deafening. It was right above the museum. The lights in the security room buzzed angrily. Then, with a loud pop, the light bulb exploded. Alice screamed. Ah! Darkness. Complete. Total darkness. The monitors on the wall went black. The hum of the computer fan stopped. The electric heater stopped. The room was pitch black. Alice sat frozen in her chair. She counted in her head. 1, 2, 3. Mrs. Sterling said the generator would start in 10 seconds. 8, 9, 10. Alice waited. She looked for the lights. But nothing happened. The darkness stayed. The generator did not start. This is not good, Alice whispered. She stood up slowly. She reached for her heavy flashlight on her belt. A beam of white light cut through the dark room. Then, she heard it. It was not the wind. It was not the rain. Somewhere in the museum, far away in the big empty halls, there was a sound. Clang. It sounded like metal hitting stone. Alice held her breath. She listened. Scrape. Scrape. Footsteps. Someone was inside the museum. Alice stood in the dark security room. Her hand shook as she held the flashlight. The beam of light danced on the wall. She picked up the radio to call the police. She pressed the button. Hello? This is Alice. Help. Only static noise came from the radio. The storm or the power cut broke the signal. She tried the landline phone again. It was dead. Silence. I am alone, she whispered. Alice knew the rules. Rule number 1. Stay in the security room. But she also knew the noise. Someone was in the museum. They were near the Grand Gallery. If she stayed here, the thief might steal the painting. She took a deep breath. She pulled her shoulders back. You can do this, Alice, she told herself. She opened the door of the security room. Creak. The sound was loud in the silent building. She stepped into the main hall. It was very cold. The heating was off. The air felt heavy and damp. Alice pointed her flashlight forward. The white circle of light hit a statue of a Roman soldier. For a second, it looked like a real man. Alice jumped back. Just a statue, she breathed. Just a statue. She walked slowly across the marble floor. She tried to be quiet, but her boots made soft thud sounds. Outside, the wind howled like a wolf. The lightning flashed through the high windows, lighting up the hall for a split second. In the flash, the museum looked like a graveyard of stone people. Alice stopped. She heard the noise again. Scrape. Click. It was coming from the corridor on the left. That was the way to the Grand Gallery. "Who is there?" Alice shouted. Her voice shook. "I have called the police. They are coming." She lied. She hoped the thief would run away. But nobody ran. The museum was silent again. Alice walked faster now. She needed to see the painting. She needed to check the metal gate. She turned the corner into the long corridor. The Grand Gallery was at the end of this hall. Suddenly, Alice saw something. Far away, at the other end of the dark corridor, there was a light. It was not a lamp. It was a flashlight beam, just like hers. It moved quickly across the wall. It moved up and down. Someone was there. Alice turned off her own flashlight immediately. Now she was invisible in the dark. She pressed her back against the cold wall. Her heart beat against her ribs like a drum. She watched the other light. It was moving closer to the Grand Gallery entrance. Then, the light stopped. It pointed at the floor. Alice squinted her eyes. In the dim light of the intruder's flashlight, she saw a shadow. It was a tall figure. It wore a long coat. The figure reached out a hand toward the door of the gallery. Alice stood in the dark hallway. She watched the stranger's light disappear inside the Grand Gallery. She counted to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then, she moved. She walked very softly on the tips of her boots. She did not turn on her flashlight. She used the dim light from the stranger to see where she was going. When she reached the open door of the gallery, she stopped. She listened. She expected to hear the sound of breaking glass. She expected to hear the alarm ringing. But there was no alarm. The museum was deadly silent. Then, she heard a mechanical sound. Alice knew that sound. It was the sound of the heavy metal gate. It was moving up. How is that possible? Alice thought. Her mind raced. Mrs. Sterling has the only key. The gate is locked. She heard footsteps running inside the room. Slap, slap, slap. Wet shoes on the floor. Alice took a deep breath. She grabbed her flashlight tight like a weapon. She jumped into the doorway and turned on her light. "Stop! Security!" she shouted. Her voice echoed in the big room. But before she could see the face of the thief, a loud roar came from the basement. The floor shook. The backup generator finally started. Suddenly, the ceiling lights turned on. All of them. The room was instantly filled with bright, white light. Alice blinked. The light hurt her eyes after the long darkness. She covered her face with her arm for a second. When she opened her eyes, she was alone. "Hello," she called out. She looked around the Grand Gallery. The room was empty. She looked at the far wall. Her heart stopped beating for a moment. The metal gate was up. It was fully open. Alice ran to the wall. She looked at the spot where the blue lady usually hung. There was only a blank, white space. The painting was gone. Alice felt dizzy. She touched the wall. It was real. The famous painting, the treasure of the city, was missing. She looked to the left. A large window was wide open. The curtains blew wildly in the wind. Rain poured into the room, making a big puddle on the floor. Alice ran to the window and looked out. It was pitch black outside. She saw nothing but rain and shadows. "They escaped," she whispered. "And they took her." She looked down at the floor near the window. In the mud and water, there was something small and shiny. Alice picked it up. It was a small, golden button. It had a design of a lion on it. Alice put the button in her pocket. She felt sick. She failed her job. The painting was gone on her first night shift. Alice ran back to the security room. Her boots squeaked on the wet floor. The power was back on, so the phone worked again. She dialed the emergency number with trembling fingers. 911, police emergency, a woman's voice answered. This is the City Museum, Alice said fast. There was a robbery. The painting. The Blue Lady is stolen. Stay where you are, the woman said. Officers are on the way. Alice put the phone down. She sat in the chair and put her head in her hands. She felt terrible. She touched the pocket of her trousers. The small golden button was still there. She decided not to tell anyone about it yet. She wanted to think first. 10 minutes later, she heard the sirens. Blue lights flashed against the museum walls. Car doors slammed. Alice opened the front door. 3 police officers walked in. Behind them walked a tall man in a beige raincoat. He looked tired and grumpy. He had grey hair and held a notebook. I am Detective Sharp, he said. He did not smile. He looked at Alice's young face. Are you the guard? Yes, sir. I am Alice. Detective Sharp looked around the empty hall. You are very young to guard a museum alone, he said rudely. Where is the painting? In the Grand Gallery. Follow me. Alice led the police to the room. Detective Sharp looked at the blank wall. He looked at the open window. He looked at the wet floor. Clean escape, Sharp muttered. They came in the window, took the painting, and left. No, Alice said. I heard the metal gate open. It needs a key. And the alarm didn't ring until the generator started. Sharp looked at her with cold eyes. The storm messed up the electronics. Kid. It happens. Don't make it complicated. Just then, the front doors opened again. Mrs. Sterling ran into the room. She was wet and her hair was messy. Ben was behind her. Where is it? Mrs. Sterling screamed. Where is my lady? She saw the empty wall and gasped. She almost fell, but Ben caught her arm. It is gone, she cried. $10 million. My reputation is ruined. Detective Sharp walked over to Mrs. Sterling. Calm down, madam. We will find it. Who has a key to this room? Only me, Mrs. Sterling said, wiping tears from her face. And the spare key is in the safe in my office. We need to check that safe, Sharp said. He turned to the other police officers. Search the building. Lock all the doors. Nobody leaves this museum until I say so. I want to talk to everyone. He looked at Alice, Ben, and Mrs. Sterling. You are all witnesses. Or maybe, he paused, you are suspects. Alice felt a knot in her stomach. The detective did not believe her story about the gate. He thought it was a simple burglary. But Alice knew it was not simple. She felt the golden button in her pocket again. The mystery was just beginning. The museum was no longer a quiet place of art. It was now a crime scene. Police officers put yellow tape across the doors of the Grand Gallery. The tape said, "Do not cross." Other officers walked through the hallways with bright flashlights. They looked under benches and behind curtains. They were looking for the thief, but the museum was empty. Detective Sharp stood in the center of the main hall. He looked at his watch. "Nobody leaves," he shouted to his team. "Lock the staff entrance. Lock the back windows. We need to check every inch of this building." Alice stood near the reception desk. She felt cold. She wanted to go home, drink hot chocolate, and sleep. But she knew she could not leave. Mrs. Sterling was pacing back and forth. She was very angry. "This is unacceptable." Mrs. Sterling shouted, "My museum! My beautiful museum!" Ben sat on a chair in the corner. He held his head in his hands. He looked sick. "I don't understand," he whispered. "The alarm system is perfect. It is impossible to bypass." Detective Sharp turned to Mrs. Sterling. "Madam, let's check your office. We need to see that spare key." They walked up the stairs to the director's office. Alice followed them. She wanted to see what happened. The office was large and elegant. There was a big painting of Mrs. Sterling on the wall. Behind the painting was a hidden wall safe. Mrs. Sterling typed a code into the keypad. Beep, 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 beep. The safe door clicked open. Mrs. Sterling reached inside. She pulled out a small velvet box. She opened it. "It is here," she said. She held up a golden key. "The spare key is safe." Detective Sharp frowned. He took the key and looked at it. "If the spare key is here, and you had your key in your pocket, how did the thief open the gate?" "I don't know," Mrs. Sterling cried. Alice spoke up. "Maybe they hacked the system." Detective Sharp turned slowly to look at Ben. Ben's face turned white. "You," the detective said, pointing a finger at Ben. "You are the IT manager. You know the codes. You know the software. You could open the gate with a computer, right?" Ben stood up, shaking. "No. I mean, yes, technically it is possible. But I didn't do it. I was at home with my sick mother." "Can anyone prove that?" Sharp asked. Ben looked down at his shoes. "My mother was asleep. So, no one saw me." The room was silent. Alice looked at Ben. He looked terrified. She liked Ben. He was shy and kind. She did not think he was a criminal. But the detective looked suspicious. "Don't leave the building, son," Sharp said in a low voice. "I have a lot of questions for you." Sharp turned to the group. "Okay. We are done here for now. Everyone go to the staff break room. We will do formal interviews one by one." Alice walked out of the office. She felt the heavy golden button in her pocket. She looked at Ben's sad back. She looked at Mrs. Sterling's angry face. Someone is lying, Alice thought. But who? The staff break room was usually a happy place. It smelled of coffee and toast. But tonight, it felt like a prison cell. Alice sat at a small table with a cold cup of plastic machine coffee. Ben sat across from her. He was biting his fingernails. Mrs. Sterling stood by the window, looking out at the flashing blue police lights. The door opened. A police officer walked in. "Alice? The detective wants to see you now." Alice stood up. Her legs felt heavy. She walked into the small office next door. Detective Sharp sat behind a desk. A bright lamp shone in Alice's face. "Sit down," Sharp said. Alice sat. She tried to look calm, but her hands were shaking. "Tell me again," Sharp said, looking at his notebook. "You are new here. This is your first month. Correct?" "Yes, sir. My third week." "And you need money for university?" "Yes, but—" And suddenly, on your first night shift alone, a $10 million painting disappears. Sharp looked at her over his glasses. "Very convenient." "I did not take it," Alice said loud and clear. "I told you. I heard the gate. I saw a light. I tried to catch him." Sharp closed his notebook. "Maybe. Or maybe you opened the door for a friend. You can go now. Send the IT boy in." Alice walked out. She was angry. The detective did not want to find the truth. He just wanted to blame someone quickly. Back in the break room, the door opened again. Two police officers walked in with old Henry. The cleaner looked very unhappy. He wore his pajamas under a raincoat. He was wet and shivering. "This is crazy," Henry shouted. "I was in my bed. Why did you drag me here?" "We need to check your keys, Henry," the officer said. Henry threw his heavy ring of keys on the table. Check them. I have nothing to hide. I cleaned this building for 40 years. I love this place. He sat down next to Alice. Are you okay, girl? He asked, his voice softer now. I am okay, Alice whispered. But the police think Ben or I did it. Henry grunted. Police are fools. They look at the obvious things. They don't look at the shadows. Alice looked at Ben. He was talking to the detective now. She looked at Mrs. Sterling. The director was on her phone in the corner. She was whispering angrily. I told you, do not call me here. Mrs. Sterling hissed into the phone. She saw Alice looking at her and quickly hung up. She put the phone in her pocket and smiled a fake smile. Alice felt a chill. Who was she calling in the middle of a robbery investigation? She put her hand in her pocket and touched the golden lion button. The police were looking at Ben and Henry. But Alice started to think the answer was much more complicated. I need to find out who owns this button, she thought. If the police won't look for clues, I will. The investigation was officially started, and everyone was a suspect. The long, terrible night finally ended. The sun rose over the city at 6 a.m. The storm was over, but the sky was still grey. Inside the museum, everyone was exhausted. Mrs. Sterling was asleep in a chair in the break room. Old Henry was drinking his 5th cup of tea. Ben was staring at the wall, looking sad and pale. Detective Sharp walked into the room. He looked tired too. You can all go home now, the detective said. But do not leave the city. We will call you for more questions later. Alice stood up. Her legs were stiff. She wanted to go home and sleep, but her mind was still racing. She thought about the golden button in her pocket. She thought about the open window. Can I get my bag from the locker room? Alice asked. Make it quick, Sharp said. Alice walked into the hallway. The locker room was near the back entrance. To get there, she had to pass the Grand Gallery again. The police tape was still across the door. A young police officer stood there, guarding the room. He was looking at his phone and yawning. Alice walked slowly. She pretended to tie her shoelace near the door. She looked under the yellow tape into the room. The forensic team, the science police, had finished their work. They put markers on the floor. But Alice saw something near the window curtain. The curtain was long and thick. It touched the floor. The wind last night had blown the curtain aside. Now, it was back in place. Alice saw a dirty mark behind the curtain. She squinted her eyes. It was a footprint. A muddy boot print. The police had seen the wet floor in the middle of the room. But they missed this one because it was hidden behind the heavy velvet fabric. Alice looked closer. The mud was not black like the garden soil outside the museum. The mud was reddish-brown. It looked like clay. Red clay, Alice thought. Where is there red clay in the city? She memorized the shape of the boot. It had a zigzag pattern on the bottom. It was a large boot, maybe size 45 or 46. Hey, the young officer said. He put his phone away. You can't be here. Move along. Sorry, Alice said. She stood up quickly. I dropped my pen. She walked to the locker room. Her heart beat fast. She had 2 clues now. A golden lion button and a footprint with red clay. She grabbed her backpack and put on her coat. She walked to the staff exit. Ben was leaving at the same time. He looked miserable. Ben. Alice whispered. He looked at her. What? Don't worry, she said. I know you didn't do it. And I found something. The police missed it. Ben's eyes widened behind his glasses. What did you find? Not here, Alice said. She looked at Detective Sharp, who was watching them from down the hall. Go home and sleep. I will call you later. Alice walked out into the cool morning air. The city was waking up. The mystery was big, but Alice felt ready. She was not just a student anymore. She was a detective. Alice slept for 5 hours. When she woke up, it was Wednesday afternoon. Her body was tired, but her mind was wide awake. She could not stop thinking about the red mud. I have to tell the police, she decided. If they find the mud, they can find the boots. If they find the boots, they find the thief. She drank a glass of water, put on a warm sweater, and rode her bicycle to the central police station. The police station was a busy, noisy place. Phones rang everywhere. Police officers walked fast with papers and coffee cups. Alice walked to the front desk. I need to speak to Detective Sharp, she told the officer. It is about the museum robbery. The officer pointed to a glass office at the back. He is in there. Knock first. Alice walked to the glass door and knocked. Knock, knock. Detective Sharp looked up. He was eating a sandwich and reading a file. He looked annoyed. He waved his hand. Come in. Alice opened the door. Hello, detective. I have important information. Sharp put his sandwich down. He wiped his mouth with a napkin. Make it fast, Alice. I am very busy. We are checking the bank accounts of your friend Ben. Ben is innocent, Alice said firmly. Listen. I went back to the Grand Gallery this morning. Behind the long velvet curtain, near the window, there is a footprint. Sharp sighed. He leaned back in his chair. We examined the whole room, Alice. My team is the best. They missed it, Alice insisted. The curtain hid it. The footprint is made of red clay. Red mud. Not the black dirt from the museum garden. Detective Sharp laughed. It was a short, unkind laugh. Red clay. Listen to me, young lady. You read too many mystery books. That mud is probably from old Henry's mop. Or maybe a tourist. But the museum was closed. Alice said. And the clay is special. It is. Sharp stood up. He was a tall man, and he loomed over her. You are a student. You study art, not crime. Leave the police work to the police. Go back to your books. If you interfere again, I will arrest you for obstructing justice. Alice's face turned red. She was angry and embarrassed. She stood up straight. Fine, she said. I will go. She walked out of the office and out of the station. She stood on the sidewalk and took a deep breath of fresh air. He thinks I am just a silly girl, Alice whispered to herself. She clenched her fists. He is wrong. The mud is a clue. And if he won't follow it, I will. She took out her phone. She searched on the internet. Where to find red clay in the city? The map on her phone showed 3 locations. The river bank, west side. The brick factory, north side. The construction site, old town. Alice looked at the map. Okay, she said. The investigation begins. Alice looked at the map on her phone. The 3 locations with red clay were far apart. Before she started her journey, she wanted to talk to a friend. She needed to share her ideas with someone who was not a grumpy police detective. She called Sophie. Sophie was the museum tour guide with the bright red hair. Hello. Sophie answered. Her voice sounded tight and high. Hi, Sophie. It's Alice. Can we meet? I need to talk to you about the robbery. There was a long silence on the phone. I don't know, Alice. I am very tired. The police asked me questions for 2 hours. Please, Alice said. Just for 20 minutes. Meet me at the Star Cafe near the university. Okay, Sophie sighed. See you in 10 minutes. Alice arrived at the cafe first. She ordered a hot chocolate. She sat at a table near the window. Outside, the sky was still grey, but it was not raining. Sophie arrived 5 minutes later. Usually, Sophie wore colourful clothes and smiled a lot. Today, she wore a big black coat and sunglasses. She looked around the cafe before she sat down. She looked scared. "Hi," Sophie said quietly. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red and puffy. She looked like she had been crying. "Are you okay?" Alice asked gently. "I am terrified, Alice," Sophie whispered. She leaned across the table. "This is serious. Someone stole the blue lady. This is not a game." "I know," Alice said. "But the police are blaming Ben. And they are blaming me. We have to find the real thief." Sophie took a sip of her black coffee. Her hand shook. The cup rattled against the saucer. Clink, clink. "You should stop, Alice," Sophie said. "Let the police do their job. Don't ask questions." "Why?" Alice asked. She looked at her friend closely. "Sophie, you know something. You saw that man yesterday. The man in the grey hat." Sophie looked away. She looked at the door of the cafe. "I didn't see his face. I told you. He was just a tourist." "But you said he was weird," Alice pressed. "You said he looked at the cameras." "I was wrong." Sophie snapped. She sounded angry now. "He was just a normal man. Forget about him." Alice sat back. She was surprised. Sophie was lying. Alice was sure of it. Sophie remembered the man, but now she wanted to protect him. Or maybe she was afraid of him. Suddenly, Sophie's phone buzzed on the table. Sophie looked at the screen. Her face went pale white. She quickly grabbed the phone and put it in her pocket. She did not answer it. "Who was that?" Alice asked. "Nobody," Sophie said. She stood up quickly. "I have to go. My mom is waiting for me." "Sophie, wait. You haven't finished your coffee." "I'm sorry, Alice. Please, stop investigating. It is dangerous." Sophie ran out of the cafe. Alice watched her go. She saw Sophie stop at the corner and look back. Then, she hurried away down the street. Alice looked at Sophie's full cup of coffee. She felt a knot in her stomach. Sophie was hiding something big. And she was scared. Alice finished her hot chocolate. She was more determined now. She stood up and put her backpack on. "Next stop," she said. "The construction site." Alice looked at the map on her phone. The 3 locations with red clay were far apart. Before she started her journey, she wanted to talk to a friend. She needed to share her ideas with someone who was not a grumpy police detective. She called Sophie. Sophie was the museum tour guide with the bright red hair. "Hello." Sophie answered. Her voice sounded tight and high. "Hi, Sophie. It's Alice. Can we meet? I need to talk to you about the robbery." There was a long silence on the phone. "I don't know, Alice. I am very tired. The police asked me questions for 2 hours." "Please," Alice said. "Just for 20 minutes. Meet me at the Star Cafe near the university." "Okay," Sophie sighed. "See you in 10 minutes." Alice arrived at the cafe first. She ordered a hot chocolate. She sat at a table near the window. Outside, the sky was still grey, but it was not raining. Sophie arrived 5 minutes later. Usually, Sophie wore colourful clothes and smiled a lot. Today, she wore a big black coat and sunglasses. She looked around the cafe before she sat down. She looked scared. "Hi," Sophie said quietly. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red and puffy. She looked like she had been crying. "Are you okay?" Alice asked gently. "I am terrified, Alice," Sophie whispered. She leaned across the table. "This is serious. Someone stole the blue lady. This is not a game." "I know," Alice said. "But the police are blaming Ben. And they are blaming me. We have to find the real thief." Sophie took a sip of her black coffee. Her hand shook. The cup rattled against the saucer. Clink, clink. "You should stop, Alice," Sophie said. "Let the police do their job. Don't ask questions." "Why?" Alice asked. She looked at her friend closely. "Sophie, you know something. You saw that man yesterday. The man in the grey hat." Sophie looked away. She looked at the door of the cafe. "I didn't see his face. I told you. He was just a tourist." "But you said he was weird," Alice pressed. "You said he looked at the cameras." "I was wrong." Sophie snapped. She sounded angry now. "He was just a normal man. Forget about him." Alice sat back. She was surprised. Sophie was lying. Alice was sure of it. Sophie remembered the man, but now she wanted to protect him. Or maybe she was afraid of him. Suddenly, Sophie's phone buzzed on the table. Sophie looked at the screen. Her face went pale white. She quickly grabbed the phone and put it in her pocket. She did not answer it. "Who was that?" Alice asked. "Nobody," Sophie said. She stood up quickly. "I have to go. My mom is waiting for me." "Sophie, wait. You haven't finished your coffee." "I'm sorry, Alice. Please, stop investigating. It is dangerous." Sophie ran out of the cafe. Alice watched her go. She saw Sophie stop at the corner and look back. Then, she hurried away down the street. Alice looked at Sophie's full cup of coffee. She felt a knot in her stomach. Sophie was hiding something big. And she was scared. Alice finished her hot chocolate. She was more determined now. She stood up and put her backpack on. "Next stop," she said. "The construction site." The old town was the most historic part of the city. The streets were narrow and made of cobblestones. The buildings were very old, with crooked roofs and small windows. Alice rode her bicycle slowly. The ride took 30 minutes. When she arrived, she saw a large fence made of wood. On the fence, a sign said, "Danger. Keep out. Historic Restoration Project." Alice got off her bike and walked near the fence. She looked at the ground. Her heart beat faster. The ground here was not black soil. It was thick, sticky, reddish-brown mud. It was red clay. "This is it," Alice whispered. "The red clay from the museum footprint." She looked through a gap in the wooden fence. Inside, there were piles of bricks, bags of cement, and deep holes in the ground. It was a construction site for an old library. There were no workers today. The site was silent and empty. Alice walked around the perimeter of the fence. Near the main gate of the construction site, there was a large blue plastic trash bin. It was overflowing with garbage, coffee cups, sandwich wrappers, and old newspapers. Alice remembered the detective books she read. Detectives always look in the trash, she thought. She wrinkled her nose. Gross. She looked around to make sure nobody was watching. The street was empty. She put on her winter gloves and reached into the trash bin. She moved a wet newspaper. She moved a dirty coffee cup. Then, she saw something small and colorful. It was a piece of paper. It was torn in half. Alice picked it up and wiped off a piece of banana peel. She looked at the paper closely. It was a ticket. City Museum, Admit 1. Date, Tuesday, October 12th. Time: 2:15 p.m. Alice gasped. Tuesday, that was yesterday. The day of the robbery. She searched the trash bin again. She found the other half of the ticket. She put the two pieces together like a puzzle. On the back of the ticket, someone had written a note in blue ink. The handwriting was messy. It said, BL, 12 o'clock. BL, Alice said aloud. Blue lady. And 12 o'clock. Midnight? That is when the lights went out. Alice's hands shook with excitement. This was real evidence. Someone was at this construction site. They walked in the red clay. Then, they went to the museum at 2:15 p.m. with this ticket. They probably scouted the room. Then, they came back at night to steal the painting. And they threw the ticket away here, at the construction site. But who works here? Alice wondered. Or who visits here? She looked at the ticket again. It was a guest pass. It was not a normal tourist ticket. Guest passes were given to friends of the staff or VIPs. Alice took a photo of the ticket with her phone. Then, she carefully put the torn pieces into a small plastic bag from her backpack. Detective Sharp said to go home, Alice smiled. But now I have proof. She was about to leave when she heard a sound behind her. Crunch. Someone stepped on a dry leaf. Alice turned around quickly. A black car was parked across the street. The window rolled up slowly. The car engine started, and it drove away fast. Alice could not see the driver, but she saw the license plate number. It started with road. They are watching me, Alice thought. She felt a cold shiver. She was not safe. Alice rode her bicycle away from the construction site. She kept checking behind her to see if the black car returned, but the street was empty. She felt safe for now, but she had many questions. Who dropped the ticket? Who drove the car? And why was there red clay in the museum? She decided to talk to old Henry. He knew everything about the museum. He knew every crack in the wall and every loose floorboard. Alice did not know where Henry lived, so she called the museum office. A secretary gave her his address. He lived in a small apartment near the river. Alice arrived at Henry's building. It was old and grey, just like Henry. She knocked on the door. Knock, knock. After a long minute, the door opened. Henry stood there. He was wearing an old wool sweater and slippers. He looked surprised. Alice, he asked, what are you doing here? Did the police send you? No, Henry, Alice said. I came to ask for your help. Can I come in? Henry hesitated, then opened the door wider. Come in. But be quick. I am watching my favorite TV show. His apartment was small but tidy. There were many books about history on the shelves. Alice sat on a worn-out sofa. Henry, Alice started. You said yesterday that you know secrets about the museum. You said you know things the police don't know. Henry sat in his armchair. He looked at Alice with his sharp eyes. I say many things, girl. Nobody listens to an old cleaner. I am listening, Alice said. She took the plastic bag with the ticket out of her pocket. She showed him the red mud stain on the ticket. I found this near the old town construction site. Do you know anything about that area? Henry looked at the ticket. Then he looked at Alice. His face changed. He looked serious now. The old town, Henry whispered. Yes. That is where the old monastery was. What monastery? Before the museum was a museum, Henry explained. It was a large house for a rich family. And before that, hundreds of years ago, the land belonged to monks. They built tunnels under the city. Tunnels to move secretly. Alice leaned forward. Tunnels? Where do they go? They go everywhere, Henry said. His voice was low and spooky. They go from the river, to the old town, and under the museum. Alice's eyes widened. Under the museum? Are there entrances? Most were closed a long time ago, Henry said. Filled with concrete. But... He paused. The basement of the museum is very deep. There is an old coal room behind the storage area. A very old door is there. Mrs. Sterling thinks it is just a closet. But I know it connects to the old tunnels. Alice stood up. The coal room. If someone opened that tunnel from the construction site, they could walk right into the museum basement, Henry finished the sentence. Under the ground. No cameras. No alarms. Henry, you are a genius. Alice smiled. Be careful, Alice, Henry warned. He looked worried. Those tunnels are dangerous. They are dark and unstable. And if someone is using them, they are dangerous too. Alice nodded. I will be careful. Thank you, Henry. She left the apartment feeling excited. The puzzle pieces were coming together. The thief didn't break in through the window. Maybe they came up from the floor. Alice arrived at her small student apartment at 7 p.m. She locked the door and checked the lock twice. She felt nervous. The black car at the construction site worried her. Her apartment was tiny. It had a bed, a desk, and a small kitchen. Usually, it was a peaceful place to study art history. Tonight, it was her detective headquarters. Alice could not sleep. Her mind was full of tunnels, mud, and missing paintings. She decided to organize her thoughts. She took a large piece of white paper and taped it to the wall. She grabbed a black marker pen. Okay, she said. Let's look at the facts. She wrote clues on one side of the paper. The golden button, found in the Grand Gallery. It has a lion design. The red mud, found behind the curtain and at the Old Town construction site. The torn ticket, found in the trash at the construction site. It says BL, 12 o'clock. The tunnels. Old Henry says a tunnel connects the Old Town to the museum basement. So, Alice whispered, pacing around the room. The thief entered the tunnels at the construction site. They walked under the city. They came up into the museum basement. They waited for the lights to go out at 12 o'clock, midnight. Then they stole the Blue Lady. It was a good theory. It explained why the doors were locked and the alarm didn't ring immediately. Then, she wrote suspects on the other side of the paper. Ben, the police think he hacked the system. Alice's opinion. Innocent. He is too scared. Old Henry, he knows the tunnels. Alice's opinion. Innocent. He is helping me. The man in the grey hat, he acted strangely in the museum. Alice's opinion. Very suspicious. Sophie, she lied about the man in the hat. She is terrified of someone. Alice's opinion. She is involved, but maybe she is forced to help. Mrs. Sterling, the director. She has the only key. She cares only about money. Alice's opinion. Maybe. Insurance fraud. Alice looked at the name Mrs. Sterling. The boss was very rich. She wore expensive clothes. Suddenly, Alice remembered something. The golden button. It had a lion on it. Alice opened her laptop. She went to the City Museum website. She looked at the photos of the staff. She found a photo of Mrs. Sterling from the Christmas party last year. Alice zoomed in on the photo. Mrs. Sterling was wearing a fancy blue jacket. The buttons on the jacket were gold. And they had small lions on them. Alice gasped. The button belongs to Mrs. Sterling. But why was a button from the director's jacket on the floor of the Grand Gallery after the robbery? Mrs. Sterling was there every day. It could be a coincidence. But it felt important. Alice sat back in her chair. The mystery was getting darker. If Mrs. Sterling was involved, Alice was in big trouble. Mrs. Sterling was powerful. Alice went to the window to close the curtains. She looked down at the street. Under the yellow street lamp, a black car was parked. The engine was running. Alice froze. It was the same car from the construction site. They followed her home. Alice stood by her window and watched the black car. It stayed there for 1 hour. Then, finally, at 2 a.m., the headlights turned on. The car drove away slowly into the dark city. Alice let out a long breath. She was safe for tonight. But she knew she had to be careful. The next morning, Thursday, the sun was shining, but Alice felt cold. She rode her bicycle to the museum. When she arrived, she saw a crowd of people outside. There were reporters with cameras and microphones. There were police cars. A big sign on the front door said, "Closed for investigation." Alice showed her security badge to a police officer at the side door. He nodded and let her in. Inside, the museum was very quiet. There were no tourists. No children running. No tour guides speaking. It felt like a ghost town. The staff members walked softly and whispered. Everyone was afraid of losing their jobs. Alice walked past the director's office. The door was half open. Mrs. Sterling was not inside. She was probably talking to the police or the press outside. Alice stopped. She saw a coat rack in the corner of the office. Hanging on the rack was the blue velvet jacket. The same jacket from the photo. Alice looked left. She looked right. Nobody was in the hallway. She stepped quickly into the office. Her heart beat fast. Thump, thump. She felt like a thief. She walked to the coat rack. She touched the expensive blue fabric. She looked at the buttons. 1, 2, 3. The top button was there. The middle button was there. But the bottom button was missing. There was only a loose thread hanging where the gold lion button should be. Alice gasped. She took the gold button from her pocket and held it next to the jacket. It was a perfect match. "I knew it," Alice whispered. She was there. She dropped it. "What are you doing?" a voice asked. Alice jumped and spun around. She hid the button in her hand behind her back. It was Ben. He stood in the doorway, holding a laptop. He looked tired and his hair was messy. "Ben," Alice said. "You scared me. I was just looking for Mrs. Sterling." Ben adjusted his glasses. He looked at the jacket, then at Alice. He closed the office door quietly. "She is outside with the TV reporters," Ben said. "She loves the attention. She is telling them how sad she is." "Ben," Alice said. She decided to trust him. She showed him the button. She pointed to the missing spot on the jacket. "Look." Ben looked closer. His eyes widened. "That is her jacket. And you found that button in the Grand Gallery?" "Yes," Alice said. "On the night of the robbery." "Ben, I think she did it. Or she helped the thief." Ben rubbed his face. "This is crazy. She is the director. Why would she steal her own painting?" "Money," Alice said. "Maybe she has debts. Maybe the painting is fake. I don't know yet. But we need proof." "What kind of proof?" "Old Henry told me about a tunnel," Alice said. "He said it connects the old town to the museum basement. The coal room." Ben nodded slowly. "The coal room. It is behind the main storage. It is always locked." "Can you open it?" Alice asked. Ben smiled a small, nervous smile. "I am the IT guy. I have electronic keys for everything. But if Mrs. Sterling catches us—" "She won't catch us," Alice said bravely. "She is busy with the cameras. Come on, Ben. Let's go to the basement." Alice and Ben walked quietly out of the office. They looked left and right. The hallway was empty. The police were still outside with the reporters. "Quickly," Alice whispered. They walked to the end of the hall. There was a door marked Authorized Personnel Only. Ben took a key card from his pocket. He touched it to the electronic lock. Beep! The light turned green, and the door opened. Behind the door was a long staircase going down. It was dark and smelled of old dust and cold stone. "I hate the basement," Ben said. His voice was shaky. "It is spooky down here." "Don't worry," Alice said. She turned on the flashlight on her phone. "I am with you." They walked down the stairs. Step, step, step. The air got colder. At the bottom of the stairs, there was a huge room. This was the main storage area. It was full of wooden boxes, old statues covered in white sheets, and broken furniture. The white sheets looked like ghosts in the dark. "Which way to the coal room?" Alice asked. "In the back," Ben said. "Behind the Egyptian crates." They walked through the maze of boxes. Alice looked at the floor. The floor was grey concrete. It was clean. "Here it is," Ben said. He stopped in front of a small, heavy wooden door. It looked very old. The wood was black and rotten in some places. There was no electronic lock here. Just a simple, rusty iron handle. "Old Henry said this leads to the tunnels," Alice whispered. She shone her light on the floor in front of the door. She gasped. "Ben! Look!" Ben looked down. "What is it?" "The floor," Alice pointed. "Look at the dust." On the grey dusty floor, there were marks. Something heavy was dragged here. And in the corner, near the doorframe, there was a small pile of dried mud. Alice touched it with her finger. It crumbled. It was reddish-brown. "Red clay," Alice said. Her eyes shone with excitement. "Just like in the Grand Gallery. Just like at the construction site." "So, someone came through this door?" Ben asked. "Yes. They came from the tunnels, walked through this door, went upstairs, and stole the painting." Alice reached for the rusty handle. "Is it locked?" She pulled the handle. The door opened easily. It was not locked. "It is open," Alice said. She looked into the darkness behind the door. A cold wind blew out from the hole. It smelled like wet earth and the river. "We have to go in," Alice said. Ben took a step back. "No way. I'm not going in there. It is dangerous, Alice. Henry said the tunnels are unstable." "We need proof, Ben. We need to find the painting. It might be down there." Suddenly, they heard a noise from the top of the stairs. A door opened and closed. Bang! "Is someone there?" A man's voice shouted. It was Detective Sharp. "The police." Ben whispered. "If they find us here, we are in big trouble." "Hide," Alice said. She pulled Ben behind a large box containing a mummy case. They crouched down in the shadows and held their breath. Alice and Ben squeezed tight into the corner behind the large wooden box. The box smelled like old spices. Alice held her hand over her mouth to stay quiet. Ben's glasses were foggy because he was sweating. Detective Sharp walked down the stairs. He shone his bright flashlight around the room. The beam of light passed over the boxes. It passed over the mummy case. It missed Alice and Ben by only a few inches. "Hello." Sharp called out again. "Is anyone down here?" The room was silent. Alice could hear her own heart beating. Thump, thump. Sharp walked deeper into the room. He walked toward the coal door. Alice stopped breathing. If he saw the open door and the red clay, he would know about the tunnel. Or worse, he would find them hiding there. Suddenly, Sharp's phone rang. He stopped walking and answered it. Sharp speaking. Alice listened carefully. "No," Sharp said into the phone. "I didn't find the painting yet. We looked everywhere upstairs." "Yes, I know Mrs. Sterling is angry. She is shouting at everyone." Sharp paused and listened to the other person. Then he laughed. It was a cynical, dry laugh. "Yeah," Sharp said. "She called the insurance company 5 minutes after the robbery. She wants the money fast. $10 million is a lot of cash. Okay. I am coming up now. Don't let her leave." Sharp turned around. He did not check the coal door. He walked back to the stairs and ran up quickly. The door at the top closed with a click. Alice and Ben let out a long breath. "That was close," Ben whispered. He wiped his glasses on his shirt. "Did you hear him?" Alice asked. Her eyes were wide. Mrs. Sterling called the insurance company immediately. She wants the $10 million. "So?" Ben asked. "That is normal for a museum, right?" "Maybe," Alice said. "But remember the missing button? Remember the fake smile for the cameras? I think she needed the money. Maybe the museum is broke." They stood up and brushed the dust off their clothes. "We can't go into the tunnel now," Alice said. "Sharp might come back. Let's go to the break room. I want to see the news." They crept back up the stairs and locked the basement door. They walked to the staff break room. Old Henry was there, eating a sandwich. The small TV in the corner was on. "Look," Henry said, pointing at the TV with a pickle. "The boss is a movie star." On the screen, a news reporter was interviewing Mrs. Sterling outside the museum. Mrs. Sterling was crying into a handkerchief. "It is a tragedy," Mrs. Sterling said on TV. "The Blue Lady was the soul of this city. But do not worry. We have insurance. We will use the money to make the museum even better." Then, for 1 second, she stopped crying. She looked at the camera. Her eyes were not sad. They looked cold and calculating. Then she started crying again. "She is acting," Alice said. "It is a performance." "She is a very bad actress," Henry grumbled. Alice looked at the TV screen again. In the background of the video, behind Mrs. Sterling, Alice saw something. Standing in the crowd of people watching the interview was a man. He wore a grey raincoat and a grey hat. "It's him!" Alice shouted. She pointed at the screen. "The man from the museum. He is watching her." "I have to go," Alice shouted. She grabbed her coat and backpack. "Where are you going?" Ben asked, standing up. "Alice, wait. That man is outside right now," Alice said. "I can catch him." She ran out of the break room and down the hall. She burst through the front doors of the museum. The bright sunlight hit her face. The crowd of reporters was still there, but the interview was finishing. Mrs. Sterling was walking back toward the museum entrance, surrounded by police. Alice ignored her boss. She pushed through the crowd of cameramen. "Excuse me. Sorry." She looked left and right. The street was busy with cars and buses. "Where is he?" she whispered. She stood on her toes to see over the people's heads. Then, she saw him. A block away, the grey hat bobbed in the crowd like a cork in the ocean. The man was walking fast, away from the museum. He was heading toward the busy shopping district. Alice started to run. She kept a safe distance. She did not want him to see her. She pretended to look at shop windows whenever he stopped at a traffic light. The man walked for 10 minutes. He turned onto a smaller street called Baker Street. He stopped in front of a small, quiet coffee shop called The Roasted Bean. He did not go inside immediately. He stood by the door and checked his watch. He looked nervous. Alice hid behind a newspaper stand. Is he waiting for someone? She wondered. 2 minutes later, a woman walked quickly down the street. She wore a long scarf wrapped around her face, but Alice recognized the bright red hair. It was Sophie. Alice's heart sank. Sophie walked straight to the man in the grey hat. They did not shake hands. They did not hug. The man said something angry, and Sophie looked down at her shoes. She looked scared. They opened the door of the coffee shop and went inside. Alice waited for a moment. Then, she walked to the coffee shop window. She peeked through the glass, between a poster for muffins and a potted plant. They were sitting at a table in the back corner. The man was talking aggressively. He pointed a finger at Sophie. Sophie was shaking her head. She looked like she was crying. Alice needed to hear what they were saying. She pulled her hat down low. She took her glasses out of her bag. She opened the door. The bell rang. The man looked up sharply. Alice quickly looked at the menu on the wall. She prayed he did not recognize the security guard from the museum. She ordered a tea and sat at a table near them. She sat with her back to them, but she strained her ears to listen. "It is too dangerous," she heard Sophie whisper. "The police are everywhere." "We stick to the plan," the man hissed. His voice was like grinding stones. "Do you want the boss to find out what you did?" "No," Sophie sobbed quietly. "Please, no." "Then bring the key," the man said. "Tomorrow at noon. Or else." Alice froze. "The key? Which key?" Alice sat very still in the coffee shop. She looked at her cold tea. She did not drink it. She was afraid to make a noise. Behind her, the conversation continued. The man's voice was low and angry. Sophie's voice was weak and trembling. "I cannot do it," Sophie whispered. "The police are watching the staff. They check our bags when we leave. If I take the key, they will catch me." "That is not my problem," the man said. He sounded cold, like ice. "You owe us, Sophie. Do you remember your debt? Do you want your mother to know about your gambling?" Alice's eyes widened. Gambling? She thought. So that is Sophie's secret. She owes money to bad people. "Please," Sophie begged. "I will pay you the money. I just need time." "We don't want money anymore," the man hissed. "The boss wants the key to the coal chute. The old iron door. We know the cleaner has a copy. You must get it from him." Alice held her breath. They want to use the tunnel again, she realized. But why? They already stole the painting. "Old Henry keeps his keys on his belt," Sophie said. "I can't steal them." "Find a way," the man said. He hit the table with his hand. A few people in the coffee shop looked around. The barista stopped making coffee. The man lowered his head quickly. "Tomorrow," the man said quietly. "Bring the key to the Central Park fountain at 1 p.m. Do not be late. And do not talk to the police. Or the security girl." Alice froze. The security girl. He was talking about her. He knew who she was. The man stood up. The chair scraped loudly on the floor. He threw a $5 bill on the table. "Goodbye, Sophie." He walked quickly toward the door. He passed Alice's table. Alice looked down at her cup. She saw his reflection in the window. He had a sharp nose and a grey scar on his chin. He looked dangerous. The bell rang. The man was gone. Alice looked at Sophie. Sophie put her head on the table and started to cry softly. Her shoulders shook. Alice wanted to comfort her friend. She wanted to say, "I am here. I can help." But she knew she had a bigger job to do. Sophie was safe here in the coffee shop. But the man was getting away. Alice needed to know who he was and where he was going. Alice stood up quietly. She left her tea on the table. She pulled her hat down and walked out of the shop. She looked down the street. The man in the grey hat was walking fast. He was turning the corner toward the subway station. "I have to follow him," Alice whispered. "He leads to the boss." She started to walk fast. She kept a distance of 20 meters. She felt like a spy in a movie, but her stomach felt sick with fear. Alice hurried down the stairs of the subway station. The air underground was warm and stale. It smelled of hot metal and pretzels. The station was very busy. It was 5:30 p.m., and everyone was going home from work. Alice looked over the heads of the people. She saw the grey hat moving down the escalator. "I cannot lose him," she told herself. She ran to the ticket machine. She swiped her travel card. Beep. The gate opened. She squeezed through and ran to the escalator. She did not stand still. She walked down the moving steps, saying, "Excuse me, sorry, excuse me." When she reached the bottom, she was on the main platform. It was packed with people. There was a sea of coats and bags. Alice stood on her toes. Where was he? She looked left. She looked right. Then, she saw him. He was standing near the edge of the platform, looking at the dark tunnel. He was calm. He did not know she was there, or so she thought. Suddenly, a loud wind blew through the station. Papers flew across the floor. A low rumble grew louder and louder. The train was coming. "Please, don't get on," Alice whispered. The train arrived with a loud screech of brakes. The doors opened with a hiss. The crowd of people surged forward. It was like a giant wave. Alice tried to move toward the man, but the crowd pushed her back. A tall man with a large backpack stood in front of her. She could not move around him. "Move, please," Alice shouted. But her voice was lost in the noise of the announcements and the people. She saw the man in the grey hat step into the train car. He turned around. He stood by the glass door. Alice pushed past the man with the backpack. She ran to the door. Ding dong. "Please stand clear of the closing doors." The doors began to slide shut. Alice reached out her hand, but it was too late. The doors closed in her face. She stood on the platform, breathing hard. Through the glass window of the train, she looked at the man. He looked directly at her. He recognized her. He did not look afraid. He smiled a cold, nasty smile. Then, he raised his hand and gave a small, mocking wave. "Goodbye." The train accelerated. It disappeared into the dark tunnel. Alice was alone on the platform. The crowd dispersed. She felt small and foolish. She failed. She lost the suspect. "Stupid, stupid," she muttered. She kicked the floor. She walked slowly to a bench and sat down. She felt like crying. But then, she remembered the conversation in the coffee shop. Tomorrow, she thought. Central Park. 1 p.m. She did not need to follow him today. She knew where he would be tomorrow. And she knew what he wanted, old Henry's keys. Alice took out her phone. She needed to warn Henry. She needed to call Ben. The team needed a plan. "You won this round," Alice whispered to the dark tunnel. "But tomorrow, we will be ready." Alice ran up the stairs of the subway station. The fresh air felt good after the hot underground tunnel. She took out her phone and dialed Ben's number. Her fingers moved fast. "Pick up, pick up." She whispered. "Hello." Ben answered. He sounded sleepy. "Ben, listen to me," Alice said. "I found the man in the grey hat. He is working with Sophie. They are planning to steal old Henry's keys." "What?" Ben shouted. "Why?" "They need to use the secret tunnel again. They want to open the coal door. Is Henry at home?" "No," Ben said. "It is Wednesday. Henry always waxes the floors on Wednesday nights. He is at the museum right now." Alice felt cold fear. "Ben, meet me at the museum. Now. They might try to hurt him." Alice jumped into a taxi. She did not care about the money. "City Museum, please." Fast. The taxi drove through the evening traffic. Alice watched the city lights blur. She was worried. Old Henry was stubborn. But he was old. He could not fight a dangerous criminal. 10 minutes later, the taxi stopped at the museum gate. Alice paid the driver and ran to the staff entrance at the back of the building. Ben was already there. He was pacing back and forth under a street lamp. He looked pale. Alice. He called. I tried to call Henry, but he didn't answer. Let's go in, Alice said. They walked to the staff door. It was locked. Alice used her key card. They walked into the long hallway. It was dark, only lit by the emergency exit signs. Alice stepped on something hard. She looked down. Ben, look. She whispered. On the floor, there were hundreds of pieces of shiny glass. Alice looked up. The small window on the door of the cleaner's room was shattered. There was a big hole in the glass. Someone broke in. Ben said. His voice trembled. Henry. Alice shouted. She didn't care about being quiet anymore. Henry. Are you here? They ran down the hall toward the main lobby. They heard a loud noise. It sounded like a metal bucket falling. Alice and Ben ran into the grand gallery. There, in the center of the room, stood old Henry. He was holding his heavy mop like a spear. He was breathing hard. His face was red. Across the room, the back door was swinging open. The cool night wind blew in. Henry! Alice cried. She ran to him. Are you okay? Henry lowered the mop. He leaned on it, looking tired. I am okay, girl. Just a little shaken. Who was it? Ben asked. He looked at the open door. A man in a mask. Henry spat. He climbed in the window. He came at me. He demanded my keys. He said, "Give me the master key, old man." Did you give it to him? Alice asked. Henry smiled a toothless grin. He patted his belt. The heavy ring of keys. Never. Henry said proudly. I swung my wet mop at his face. I hit him right in the nose. He didn't expect a fight. He ran away like a scared rabbit. Alice hugged the old man. You are brave, Henry. But they will come back. They are desperate. Let them come. Henry said. But Alice saw his hand shaking. No. Alice said firmly. We have to stop them before they come back. We have a plan for tomorrow. 10 minutes later, the museum was full of police officers again. The blue lights flashed in the dark hall. Detective Sharp walked into the grand gallery. He looked very unhappy. He looked at the broken window. He looked at the shattered glass on the floor. Then, he looked at old Henry. Let me understand. Sharp said. He took out his notebook. A man in a mask broke into the museum. He attacked you. And you hit him with a wet mop. Yes. Henry said firmly. I protected the museum. Sharp looked at Henry's thin arms and grey hair. He looked skeptical. He did not believe the story. You are 70 years old, Henry. Sharp said. And you fought a young criminal. It sounds like a fairy tale. It is the truth. Alice said angrily. She stepped forward. Henry is a hero. You should thank him. Sharp ignored Alice. He turned to his officers. Search the area. Check the broken glass. A young police officer walked carefully near the window. He shined his flashlight on the floor. Detective. The officer called out. I found something. Sharp walked over. Alice and Ben watched from the corner. The officer pointed to a dark object lying under a piece of broken glass. It was a thick, dirty work glove. Sharp picked it up with a plastic bag. He looked at it closely. On the wrist of the glove, there was a name written in black marker. Henry. Sharp smiled. It was a cold smile. He turned to Henry. "Is this your glove, Henry?" he asked. Henry squinted. "Yes. I lost it 2 days ago. I couldn't find it." "You lost it 2 days ago?" Sharp asked. "But it was found under the glass that broke tonight. That means the glove was here before the window broke." The room was silent. "So?" Henry asked. "I clean this room every day." "Or?" Sharp said, his voice getting louder. "Maybe you dropped it tonight. Maybe there was no man in a mask. Maybe you broke the window yourself." "What?" Henry shouted. "That is a lie." "Is it?" Sharp walked closer to Henry. "Maybe you stole the painting on Tuesday. And tonight, you broke the window to make us think there is a dangerous thief. You want to look like a victim so we don't suspect you." "That is crazy," Alice cried. "Henry has worked here for 40 years. And maybe he wants to retire with $10 million. Sharp said. He looked at the other officers. "This changes everything. We have physical evidence." Alice looked at the glove in the plastic bag. She knew Henry was innocent. But the evidence looked bad. The detective was twisting the facts to fit his story. "I am taking you to the station, Henry," Sharp said. "We need to have a long talk." "You are making a mistake," Ben said. His voice was small and squeaky. Sharp put a hand on Henry's shoulder. "Let's go." Henry looked at Alice. He looked sad and tired. "Don't worry, girl," he whispered. "I am innocent. Find the truth." Alice watched the police take Henry away. She felt tears in her eyes. The real thieves, Mrs. Sterling, the man in the grey hat, and Sophie, were free. And now, her only ally inside the museum was going to jail. The red taillights of the police car disappeared into the night. Old Henry was gone. Alice stood on the wet pavement. She felt like a stone was in her stomach. It was a heavy, cold feeling of injustice. "This is wrong," Alice said. "This is completely wrong." Ben took off his glasses and wiped them on his shirt. He looked very distressed. "Sharp thinks Henry broke the window himself. He thinks Henry is the thief. But Henry is the most honest man I know. It was a setup," Alice said. She started to walk fast, pacing back and forth. "Think about it, Ben. The man in the grey hat wanted Henry's keys. He attacked Henry. He failed. So, what did he do? He left Henry's glove there." "He planted the glove?" Ben asked. "Yes. To make the police arrest Henry." Alice explained. "If Henry is in jail, he cannot protect the museum. And maybe—" She paused. "Maybe they think it is easier to get the keys from the police station than from Henry." "That is a bold plan," Ben said. "These are dangerous people." Alice replied. "They have Mrs. Sterling on their side. They are smart." Alice looked at the museum. It was dark and silent now. The broken window was covered with a wooden board. The museum was locked. But it felt vulnerable. "Go home, Ben," Alice said. "Get some sleep. We have a big day tomorrow." "What are you going to do?" Ben asked. "I'm going to the police station first thing in the morning," Alice said. "I need to talk to Henry. I need to tell him about the man in the grey hat and Sophie. And then, Alice checked her watch. "At 1 p.m. I'm going to Central Park. Sophie is meeting the man there. I will be there too. Ben looked worried. Alice, be careful. Remember what happened to the window. These men are violent. I know, Alice said. She touched the golden button in her pocket. But we are the only ones who know the truth. If we stop, Henry goes to prison for a crime he didn't commit. Alice walked home under the yellow streetlights. The city was quiet. She thought about Sophie. Sophie was her friend. They used to eat lunch together. They laughed about tourists. Now, Sophie was part of a criminal gang. Why, Sophie? Alice wondered. Why did you do it? Alice arrived at her apartment. She double-locked the door. She sat on her bed and looked at her murder board on the wall. The list of clues. She took a red marker. Next to old Henry, she wrote, "Innocent. Arrested." Next to Sophie, she wrote, "Guilty. Scared." She lay down on her bed, but her eyes stayed open. She stared at the ceiling. She played the events of the last few days in her mind like a movie. The painting, the storm, the tunnel, the button, the glove. Hold on, Henry. She whispered into the dark room. I am coming. The next morning, Friday, the sky was blue and clear. It was a beautiful day, but Alice felt terrible. She rode her bicycle to the police station again. She walked up to the front desk. The officer looked at her. I am here to see Henry. Alice said firmly. He was arrested last night. I am his granddaughter. It was a small lie. Alice was not related to Henry, but she knew the police would not let a colleague visit him. The officer looked at Alice's worried face. He sighed. Okay. The officer said, You have 10 minutes. He is in holding cell 4. Alice walked down a long, grey corridor. It smelled of bleach and cold coffee. A guard opened a heavy metal door. Inside the small room, Henry sat at a metal table. He looked very small. He was not wearing his uniform. He wore a grey prison shirt. He looked 20 years older than yesterday. Henry. Alice whispered. She sat opposite him. Henry looked up. His eyes were sad, but when he saw Alice, he smiled a little. Alice. You came. Of course I came. Alice said. She reached across the table to hold his hand, but the guard said, No touching. Alice pulled her hand back. They think I did it, Alice. Henry said quietly. Detective Sharp says I am the mastermind. He says I stole the painting to buy a house in Florida. We know that is not true. Alice said. Ben and I are working on it. We know about the man in the grey hat. We know about Sophie. Henry's eyes widened. Sophie. The tour guide. Yes. Alice explained. She is helping them. She is forced to help them. Henry shook his head. Poor girl. She is weak. Alice leaned closer to the table. She lowered her voice. Henry, listen to me. The man in the grey hat is meeting Sophie today at 1 p.m. in Central Park. They were talking about a key. They want the key to the coal room door. Henry nodded slowly. Yes. The thief asked for it last night. He needs it to use the tunnel again. Did the police take your keys? Alice asked. Yes. Henry said. They took my big ring of keys. They are in a plastic bag in the evidence room. If the thief has a friend in the police, we have to assume they can get them. Alice said. Henry smiled. It was a clever, secret smile. He looked at the guard, then whispered to Alice. They have the keys, Alice, but they don't have the right key. Alice looked confused. What do you mean? The key to the old coal door is very special. Henry whispered. It is an antique iron key. I do not keep it on my belt. It is too heavy. I keep it in a safe place. Where is it? Alice asked. It is in the museum. Henry said. In the locker room. In my locker. Number 15. But your locker is locked. Alice said. Henry reached into his shoe. He pulled out a tiny, silver key. He hid it in his hand. He looked at the guard. The guard was looking at his phone. Henry slid the tiny key across the table to Alice. Take it. He hissed. Open my locker. Get the iron key. Do not let them find it. Alice covered the small key with her hand. She put it quickly into her pocket. Time is up. The guard shouted. Alice stood up. I will fix this, Henry. I promise. Be careful, Alice. Henry said. The tunnel is dark, but the people you are fighting are darker. Alice walked out of the cell. She had a mission. She had to get to the locker before the thieves did. Alice arrived back at the museum at 11:30 a.m. She had very little time. She had to get the key and then go to Central Park by 1 p.m. The museum was still closed to the public. A few police officers stood near the front door, drinking coffee and talking. Alice showed her ID badge. I need to get my lunch from the staff room. She lied. The officer nodded. Go ahead. But stay away from the gallery. Alice walked quickly to the back of the building. Her heart beat fast. She felt like a criminal. But she was doing this for Henry. She entered the staff locker room. It was a long, narrow room lined with grey metal lockers. It smelled of old shoes and floor wax. It was silent. Alice looked at the numbers. 10, 11, 12. She stopped in front of locker 15. There was a small piece of tape on the door. It said Henry. Alice took the tiny silver key from her pocket. Her hand shook a little. She put the key into the lock. The lock opened. Alice pulled the door. It made a loud squeak. Alice froze. She looked at the door of the locker room. Nobody came in. She was safe. She looked inside the locker. It was very tidy. Just like Henry. There was his old winter coat, a spare pair of work boots, and a photo of a dog. On the top shelf, there was a small wooden box. Alice reached up and took the box. It was heavy. She opened the lid. Inside, sitting on a bed of red velvet, was a large, black, iron key. It looked very old and rusty. It looked like a key from a castle in a storybook. The key to the coal tunnel. Alice whispered. I found it. She put the heavy key in her pocket. It felt cold against her leg. But the box was not empty. Under the key, there was a bundle of papers. They were old yellow letters, tied together with a piece of string. Alice was curious. Why did Henry keep old letters in his locker? She picked up the top letter. It was dated 1985. The handwriting was elegant. Alice read the first line. Dear Henry, thank you for keeping my secret. The copy is perfect. The copy. Alice thought. What copy? Suddenly, the door of the locker room opened. Alice jumped. She quickly shoved the letters into her backpack. She closed the locker door softly. She turned around. Mrs. Sterling walked into the room. She was holding a phone to her ear. She looked stressed and angry. She did not see Alice at first because she was looking at the floor. I don't care about the police. Mrs. Sterling shouted into the phone. I want the insurance money approved by Monday. I have debts to pay. She looked up and saw Alice. She stopped talking. Her eyes narrowed. Alice. Mrs. Sterling said slowly. "What are you doing here?" Alice tried to look calm. She held her backpack tight. The heavy iron key weighed down her pocket. I just came to get my books, Mrs. Sterling," Alice said. "For my university class." Mrs. Sterling looked at locker 15. Then she looked at Alice. She did not look convinced. Mrs. Sterling stared at Alice. Her eyes were like lasers. She looked at Alice's hands, then at her backpack. "Your books?" Mrs. Sterling asked. Her voice was ice cold. "Why do you have your backpack in the locker room? You know the rules. No personal bags in the secure area." Alice's heart hammered in her chest. If Mrs. Sterling opened the backpack, she would find the iron key and the old letters. She would know Alice was investigating. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sterling," Alice said, trying to smile. "I was just leaving. I forgot my art history textbook in my locker yesterday. I have an exam tomorrow." Mrs. Sterling took a step closer. She looked at the locker behind Alice. "That is Henry's locker. Why were you near Henry's locker?" Alice thought fast. I was looking for a pen. I thought maybe Henry left one on the bench." Mrs. Sterling frowned. She looked ready to grab the bag. But suddenly, her phone buzzed again. She looked at the screen. It was the insurance agent. "Fine," Mrs. Sterling snapped. "Go. Get out. And don't come back until the police finish their work. You are a distraction." "Yes, Mrs. Sterling. Thank you." Alice walked past her boss. She felt Mrs. Sterling's eyes on her back. She walked calmly until she was out of the door. Then, she ran. She ran to her bicycle and rode away fast. She did not stop until she was 3 blocks away. She found a quiet bench in a small park. It was 12:15 p.m. She had 45 minutes before the meeting in Central Park. Alice sat down and took a deep breath. She opened her backpack. The heavy iron key was safe. The bundle of letters was safe. She untied the string around the letters. There were 5 envelopes. The paper was yellow and brittle. It looked very old. She opened the first letter. The date was June 14, 1985. Alice began to read. "Dear Henry, you are a good man and a loyal employee. I trust you with my life. Last night, we did it. The switch is complete. The artist finished the copy yesterday. It is perfect. Even an expert cannot see the difference. We hung the copy on the wall in the Grand Gallery. The public will admire the fake, and they will never know. The real Blue Lady is too precious. The humidity in the gallery is bad for the paint. I have locked the real painting in the old lead vault in the sub-basement. It will be safe there forever. Keep this secret, Henry. Do not tell anyone. Not even the new director. Sincerely, Mr. Arthur Pendleton, former museum director." Alice dropped the letter. Her mouth fell open. "Oh my goodness," she whispered. She read it again. "The switch is complete. We hung the copy." Alice looked up at the trees. The world suddenly looked different. For 30 years, millions of people visited the museum. They looked at the Blue Lady. They took photos. They cried. They loved it. But they were looking at a fake. The real painting wasn't stolen. Alice realized. The thieves stole a copy. A worthless copy. She laughed. It was a nervous laugh. The man in the grey hat. Mrs. Sterling, the insurance company. They were all fighting over fake painting. But where is the real one? Alice asked herself. The letter said, "The old lead vault in the sub-basement." Alice looked at the iron key in her hand. The sub-basement. She thought. That must be where the coal tunnel leads. Henry knew. That is why he protected the museum so fiercely. He was not guarding the painting on the wall. He was guarding the secret in the basement. Alice checked her watch. 12:45 p.m. I have to go to Central Park, she said. Sophie is in danger, and the thieves are going to be very angry when they find out they stole a piece of worthless canvas. Alice rode her bicycle as fast as she could. The wind blew through her hair. Her legs burned, but she did not stop. She had 15 minutes to get to Central Park. In her pocket, the heavy iron key bounced against her leg. In her backpack, the old letter told a shocking truth. The thieves had stolen a worthless copy. Mrs. Sterling was crying over a fake. The police were searching for a fake. Only Alice and old Henry knew the secret of the real Blue Lady. At 12:55 p.m., Alice arrived at the park. It was a large, green park in the middle of the city. She locked her bicycle to a fence and ran toward the big stone fountain in the center. There were many people in the park. Children were playing with a ball. A man was playing a guitar. It was a happy scene. But Alice felt sick with worry. She saw the fountain. The water shot high into the air. Alice hid behind a large bush with thick leaves. She had a good view of the benches near the water. At 1 p.m. exactly, Sophie arrived. Sophie looked terrible. She was wearing sunglasses again, but her face was pale. She held her handbag tightly against her chest. She sat on a bench and looked at her phone. Her foot tapped nervously on the ground. 2 minutes later, the man in the grey hat appeared. He walked out from behind a statue. He did not look like a tourist today. He looked angry. Alice held her breath. She took out her phone and started to record a video through the leaves of the bush. The man sat down next to Sophie. He did not look at her. "Do you have the key?" the man asked. His voice was low, but the wind carried the sound to Alice. "No," Sophie whispered. "I couldn't do it. Henry was arrested. The police have his keys." The man cursed. He grabbed Sophie's arm. "You are useless. We need to get back inside the museum tonight." "Why?" Sophie asked. She tried to pull her arm away. "You have the painting. You won. Leave me alone." "We did not win," the man hissed. He looked around to see if anyone was listening. "The buyer is an expert. He tested the paint this morning. He says the paint is too fresh. It is chemical paint, not oil paint from 1920. Sophie gasped. "What?" "The painting we stole is a fake," the man said angrily. "A cheap copy. The real painting is still in the museum somewhere. We have to find it before the police realize the truth." Alice's heart skipped a beat. She was right. The thieves knew. And now, they were desperate. "We need the coal tunnel key," the man said. "If you don't have it, we will break the door down. Tonight. Please." Sophie cried. "Don't hurt anyone else. If you want to save yourself," the man said, standing up. "You will leave the back door unlocked tonight at midnight. Do not fail us again." He let go of her arm. He stood up and adjusted his grey hat. Then, he walked away quickly into the crowd. Sophie sat on the bench, burying her face in her hands. She was sobbing. Alice stopped the video recording. She had proof of the conspiracy. She knew their plan. But she also saw that her friend was in deep trouble. Alice put her phone in her pocket. She stepped out from behind the bush. "Sophie," Alice said softly. Sophie jumped up. She looked terrified. "Alice, how long have you been there?" Sophie looked at Alice with wide, frightened eyes. She stood up to run, but her legs were shaking too much. She sat back down heavily on the bench. "You heard everything," Sophie whispered. It was not a question. Alice sat next to her. She did not look angry. She looked sad. "Yes. I know about your gambling debt. I know they are forcing you to help them." Sophie covered her face with her hands. "I am so sorry, Alice. I never wanted this. It started as a small debt, just a few $1,000s. Then it grew. These men, they own a loan shark company. They said if I helped them rob the museum, my debt would be zero. They lied to you," Alice said gently. "Criminals always lie. They used you to open the window. They used you to get information. And now, they want you to open the back door tonight. I have no choice." Sophie sobbed. "If I don't do it, they will hurt my mother." "You do have a choice," Alice said firmly. "You can help us stop them." Sophie looked up. "Us? Who is us?" "Me, Ben, and Henry," Alice said. "We are a team, and we know something the thieves don't know." Alice looked around to ensure they were safe. She leaned close to Sophie's ear. "The painting they stole on Tuesday. It was a fake." Sophie stopped crying. She stared at Alice. "What?" "But Mrs. Sterling said it was worth $10 million. Mrs. Sterling thinks it is real," Alice explained. "But Henry knew. The real Blue Lady was hidden years ago. The thieves have a worthless copy. That is why the man in the grey hat was so angry just now. Their buyer found out it was just chemical paint and cheap canvas." Sophie started to laugh. It was a hysterical, nervous laugh. They stole a fake. All of this trouble for nothing. "Exactly." Alice smiled. "But now they are desperate. They are coming back tonight to tear the museum apart looking for the real one. If they enter, they will destroy everything. We have to stop them." Sophie wiped her eyes. She took a deep breath. She looked at Alice, and for the first time in days, she looked brave. "Okay," Sophie said. "I am tired of being afraid. I want to help. What do we do?" "First," Alice said, "we need to call Ben. We need to meet at a safe place. Do not go home. They might be watching your house. We can go to the university library," Sophie suggested. "It is crowded and open late." "Perfect," Alice said. They walked out of the park together. Alice felt stronger now. She had the key to the tunnel, the letter from the past, and her friend back on her side. Tonight is the final battle. Alice thought. The thieves are coming for a treasure they can't find. But I have the key. She touched the iron key in her pocket. She knew exactly where the real painting was, and she was going to make sure the man in the grey hat never touched it. The university library was a quiet place. Students were studying for exams, surrounded by tall mountains of books. The air smelled like old paper and coffee. Alice and Sophie sat at a wooden table in the back corner. They whispered so they did not disturb the other students. 10 minutes later, Ben arrived. He carried his heavy laptop bag. He looked sweaty and nervous. When he saw Sophie, he stopped. He looked at Alice with confused eyes. "Alice," Ben whispered. "Why is she here?" "She is working with the bad guys." "Not anymore," Alice said calmly. "Sit down, Ben. Sophie is on our side now. She told me everything." Ben sat down slowly. He looked at Sophie suspiciously. Sophie looked down at her hands. "I am sorry, Ben." I was afraid. It's okay. Alice interrupted. We don't have time for apologies. We have a crisis. Ben, look at this. Alice took the old yellow letter out of her backpack. She slid it across the table to Ben. Ben read the letter. His eyes got wider and wider. He cleaned his glasses and read it again. This is impossible. Ben said. The blue lady was a fake. For 30 years. Yes. Alice said. The thieves stole a copy. That is why they are coming back tonight. They know they have a worthless painting. They are going to break in to find the real one. And they want me to open the back door at midnight. Sophie added, her voice shaking. If they get inside. Ben said. They will destroy the museum looking for the vault. We have to call the police. Detective Sharp won't listen. Alice said. He thinks old Henry is the thief. If we tell him about a secret vault and a fake painting, he will think we are crazy. He will arrest us too. So, what do we do? Ben asked. Alice took the heavy iron key from her pocket. She put it on the table. It made a heavy thud. We have to find the real painting first. Alice said. We have to prove it exists. And we have to catch the thieves in the act. She leaned forward. Here is the plan. Tonight, the museum is closed. But Ben, you can disable the alarm for the staff door, right? Yes. Ben nodded. I can do that. Good. We will go in at 8 p.m. We will use this key to open the coal door in the basement. We will find the secret vault and get the Real painting. And then? Sophie asked. Then? Alice said, looking at Sophie, you will send a message to the man in the grey hat. Tell him the door is open. When they come in, they will find us waiting. And we will have the police waiting outside. How will we get the police? Ben asked. I will call Detective Sharp when we have the real painting in our hands. Alice said. When he sees the real blue lady, he will have to believe us. And he will be there to catch the gang. Ben took a deep breath. It is a dangerous plan, Alice. It is the only way to save Henry. Alice said. Are you with me? Ben looked at the key. He looked at Sophie. Then he looked at Alice. I am in. Ben said. Me too. Sophie whispered. Good. Alice said. She packed her bag. Let's go. We have a treasure to find. The sun went down, and the city became dark. At 7:55 p.m., the three friends met in the alley behind the museum. They wore dark clothes to hide in the shadows. The museum looked different at night. It looked like a giant sleeping beast. The windows were dark eyes watching them. Are you ready? Alice whispered. She pulled her black beanie hat down over her ears. I think so. Sophie said. Her voice shook. She was looking at the street, afraid that the man in the grey hat was watching. Ben? Alice asked. Ben was holding his tablet computer. His face was lit by the blue glow of the screen. He was typing very fast. I'm trying to bypass the perimeter alarm. Ben muttered. The police updated the security software yesterday. It is harder now. We don't have much time. Alice said. If the alarm rings, the police will be here in 2 minutes. And they will arrest us, not the thieves. I know. Ben said. Sweat dripped down his nose. Okay. Almost there. 3, 2, 1. Done. A small green light flashed on the electronic lock of the back door. We are in. Ben said. He let out a long breath. Alice opened the door slowly. It made a soft squeak. They stepped inside the hallway. It was pitch black. "Don't turn on the main lights," Alice warned. "Use your phones." They turned on their phone flashlights. 3 beams of white light cut through the darkness. The hallway was full of long, dancing shadows. They walked past the security room. They walked past the empty break room. The museum was silent, but the silence felt heavy. Every sound, a footstep, a zipper, a breath, sounded very loud. "I hate this place at night," Sophie whispered. She walked close to Alice. "We are going down," Alice said. They reached the door to the basement stairs. Ben used his key card. The door opened. The smell of damp earth and old dust hit them. It was colder down here. They walked down the stairs. They entered the main storage room. The white sheets on the statues looked like ghosts. A statue of a horse looked like it was ready to run. Alice led them to the back of the room. They climbed over boxes and squeezed past old furniture. Finally, they stood in front of the old, rotten wooden door. "The coal room. This is it," Alice said. She took the heavy iron key from her pocket. "Are you sure this is the way?" Sophie asked. "It looks like a closet." Henry said it leads to the sub-basement. Alice said, "To the old lead vault." Alice put the large iron key into the rusty keyhole. It fit perfectly. She tried to turn it. It was stuck. "It won't move." Alice grunted. She pushed harder. "It is too old. The rust is too thick." "Let me help," Ben said. Ben and Alice held the key together. 1, 2, 3, push. With a loud, complaining noise, the lock turned. The heavy bolt moved back. Alice pulled the handle. The wooden door swung open. Behind the door, there was no floor. There was only a dark, stone staircase going down into the deep earth. A cold wind blew up from the hole. "The secret tunnel," Ben whispered. "It is real." The stone stairs were steep and narrow. They were covered in thick dust and slippery green moss. The air smelled very old, like a grave. "Watch your step," Alice whispered. She aimed her phone light at her feet. "It is slippery." They walked down slowly. The walls were made of rough red bricks. Water dripped from the ceiling. "I don't like this," Sophie said. She was holding onto the back of Alice's coat. "This place feels evil." "It is just a tunnel," Ben said, trying to be brave. "It was used for moving coal for the heating system 100 years ago. It is just history." They counted 20 steps. Then, they reached the bottom. They were in a long, narrow tunnel. It was much colder here than in the basement above. The floor was dirt, not concrete. "Which way?" Ben asked. He shone his light left and right. The tunnel went in 2 directions. Alice remembered old Henry's words. "The old lead vault. Look at the floor," Alice said. She pointed her light at the dirt. There were marks on the ground. Faint lines in the dirt. Someone dragged something heavy this way, Alice said, pointing to the left. "Maybe Henry moving supplies. Or maybe Mr. Pendleton moving the painting 30 years ago." They turned left. The tunnel was low. Ben had to lower his head to avoid hitting the ceiling. Spiderwebs hung in the corners like grey lace. Suddenly, something ran across Alice's foot. It was small, furry, and fast. "Ah!" Sophie screamed. Her scream echoed loudly in the tunnel. "A rat! A rat touched me!" "Shish!" Alice hissed. "Quiet. Sound travels far in tunnels. If anyone is up in the museum, they might hear us." Sophie put her hand over her mouth. Sorry. She whispered. I hate rats. They walked for another 5 minutes. The tunnel seemed to go under the very center of the museum. Then, the tunnel ended. They stood in front of a heavy metal door. It was not a normal door. It was round and thick, like the door of a submarine or a bank safe. It was dull gray. Lead. Ben said. He touched the metal. This is a lead door. It protects against fire and moisture. This must be the vault. Alice looked at the door. There was no keyhole. There was no handle. There was only a wheel in the center, like on a ship. This is it. Alice said. The real blue lady is inside. She grabbed the wheel with both hands. She tried to turn it. It was frozen solid. It's stuck. She groaned. It hasn't been opened since 1985. We need leverage. Ben said. He looked around the tunnel. He found a long, rusty iron bar lying on the ground. It was an old tool for the coal furnace. Here. Ben said. He slid the iron bar into the spokes of the wheel. Push together. Alice, Ben, and Sophie pushed on the bar. They grunted with effort. Push. Alice said. The wheel moved an inch. Metal screamed against metal. The wheel turned. The heavy bolts inside the door retracted. Alice pulled the heavy door open. It swung out slowly. They pointed their flashlights into the dark room. The heavy lead door was fully open. The three friends stood at the entrance. They were afraid to go inside. The air in the room was still and dry. It did not smell like the damp tunnel. It smelled like wood and varnish. Go on. Ben whispered. He pushed Alice gently. Alice took a step inside. Her flashlight cut through the darkness. The room was small, like a large closet. It had stone walls and a stone floor. Along the walls, there were metal shelves with old boxes. But in the center of the room, there was a large wooden easel. Sitting on the easel was a painting covered by a white cloth. Alice walked slowly toward it. Her heart beat in her throat. Is that it? Sophie asked. Her voice echoed in the small stone room. There is only one way to know. Alice said. She reached out with a trembling hand. She grabbed the corner of the white cloth. She pulled it down. The cloth fell to the floor with a soft whoosh. Ben gasped. Sophie put her hand over her mouth. Alice stopped breathing for a second. There she was. The blue lady. But she was different. The painting in the gallery upstairs was beautiful. But this one was alive. The blue of her dress was deep and rich, like the ocean at night. Her skin glowed in the light of the flashlights. And her eyes, her sad, mysterious eyes, seemed to look right into Alice's soul. It is incredible. Ben whispered. The colors are so bright. It looks like it was painted yesterday. Because it has been in the dark for 30 years. Alice said. Protected from the sun. Protected from the air. She looked at the corner of the canvas. There was a signature. A. Rossi. 1920. This is the real one. Alice said. The painting upstairs was just a picture. This is art. Sophie touched the edge of the frame. It is heavy. Can we carry it? We have to. Alice said. We cannot leave her here. If the thieves come down here, they will destroy the room to find her. Ben looked at his watch. It is 8:30 p.m. We have time before midnight. Okay. Alice said. She felt strong now. She was holding a treasure worth $10 million. But to her, it was worth much more. It was the truth. Ben, you take the left side. Sophie, take the right. I will guide us. We need to take it upstairs to the Grand Gallery." "Why the Grand Gallery?" Sophie asked. "That is where the thieves are going." "Exactly." Alice smiled. Her eyes shone in the dark. "We are going to put the real painting back on the wall. We will hide in the room. When the thieves come to steal the fake again, or when they come looking for the vault, we will be waiting, and the police will see them with the painting." "That is risky," Ben said. "Very risky." "It is the only way to prove everything," Alice said. "We need to catch them with the painting. Come on. Lift on 3. 1, 2, 3. They lifted the heavy painting. They walked slowly out of the vault, back into the dark, wet tunnel. They began the long, dangerous walk back to the surface. The climb back up the stone stairs was much harder than going down. The painting was heavy. Its gold frame was solid wood, and the lead backing that protected it added extra weight. "Careful on the corners," Alice whispered, breathing hard. Her arms burned. Ben was at the back, pushing the painting up. Sophie and Alice were at the front, pulling. Finally, they reached the top of the narrow stairs. They stepped back into the coal room. They put the painting down gently on the dusty floor to rest. "We did it," Sophie gasped. She wiped dirt from her forehead. "She is out of the vault." Alice shone her flashlight around the room. Now that the adrenaline had faded a little, she noticed something she had missed before. In the corner of the coal room, hidden behind a tall stack of broken chairs, was a wooden table. It looked cleaner than the rest of the room. "What is that?" Alice asked. She walked over to the table. On it, there was a modern LED lamp, currently off, a magnifying glass, and several tubes of paint. There were also brushes, a bottle of solvent, and a roll of bubble wrap. "It looks like an art studio," Ben said, coming closer. Alice picked up a tube of paint. "Phthalo blue." She read, "This is modern acrylic paint. The Blue Lady was painted with oil in 1920. She looked at the floor. There were scraps of canvas and a practice sketch of a woman's hand. This is where they made the fake. Sophie realized. Or where they fixed it. "No," Alice said slowly. She picked up a shipping label from the table. It was filled out in handwriting she recognized. It was Mrs. Sterling's sharp, spiky writing. "Destination. Private collection. Zurich, Switzerland. Contents. Art replica. Value $500. Mrs. Sterling wasn't just stealing the painting," Alice said, her voice cold. "She was running a business. Look at these other labels." There were labels for other dates. A statue to Tokyo. A vase to London. She has been selling the real art and replacing it with fakes for years. Ben said, horrified. The Blue Lady was just the last one on the list. She is selling the city's history to pay her debts. Alice said. She felt a wave of anger. Mrs. Sterling was not just a thief. She was destroying the museum piece by piece. "We have to take this evidence," Alice said. She grabbed the shipping labels and shoved them into her pocket. "This proves everything. Even if the police don't believe the painting story, they will believe the fraud. Let's go," Sophie said nervously. "I hear something upstairs." They ran back to the painting. They lifted it up again. To the freight elevator. Ben whispered. "It is faster than the stairs." They carried the painting out of the coal room and into the main storage area. They navigated through the maze of boxes toward the elevator doors at the far end of the room. But halfway across the room, the lights on the ceiling suddenly flashed. Then, they heard a loud mechanical sound. It was the sound of the heavy electronic locks engaging on the main basement doors. "Did you do that, Ben?" Alice asked. "No," Ben said. His face went white in the flashlight beam. I disabled the locks. Someone just re-enabled them from the security room upstairs. Mrs. Sterling. Alice whispered. She knows we are here. Try the keypad. Alice shouted. Ben ran to the metal door at the top of the basement stairs. He typed in his code. The small light on the lock turned red. Access denied. She blocked my code. Ben cried. He hit the door with his fist. We are locked in. What about the freight elevator? Sophie asked. She was holding one side of the heavy painting. Her arms were shaking. They looked at the elevator doors across the room. The digital number above the door was changing. 1 G B. It is coming down. Alice whispered. They are coming. We can't carry the painting and run. Ben said. It is too heavy. We have to hide. Alice said. She looked around the chaotic storage room. There were rows of tall shelves, piles of old chairs, and large wooden crates. Over there. Alice pointed to a dark corner behind a stack of large crates marked Egyptian antiquities. Quickly. They lifted the blue lady and ran awkwardly across the room. They slid behind the tall crates just as the elevator arrived. The elevator doors slid open with a metallic whoosh. Bright light from the elevator cabin spilled into the dark room. Two figures stepped out. The first was the man in the grey hat. He held a large, heavy flashlight in one hand and a crowbar in the other. The second was Mrs. Sterling. She looked elegant in her blue coat, but her face was twisted with rage. She held a phone. I know they are down here. Mrs. Sterling said. Her voice echoed in the silent basement. I saw the motion sensors trigger in the coal room. Maybe it is rats. The man in the grey hat grunted. Rats don't use key cards to open the back door. Mrs. Sterling snapped. It is that security girl. Alice. And the computer boy. They know too much. Alice, Ben, and Sophie crouched in the shadows. They were only 10 meters away. Alice held her hand over her mouth to stop her breathing sound. Sophie closed her eyes tight. Find them. Mrs. Sterling ordered. And find the painting. If they found the vault, we are finished. The man in the grey hat smiled. He slapped the crowbar into his open hand. Don't worry, boss. He said. I will find them. This room has only one exit, and we locked it. He started to walk down the main aisle of the storage room. He swung his flashlight beam left and right. The light passed over the crate where they were hiding. Alice pulled her head down. Come out, little rats. The man called out softly. Come out and give me the key. He kicked a box of old papers. Stop making a mess. Mrs. Sterling hissed. Just find them. They are hiding. The man said. I will flush them out. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a lighter. He flicked it on. A small orange flame danced in the dark. There is a lot of old paper and wood down here. He laughed. Maybe a little fire will make them run. Alice's eyes widened in horror. Fire! In a basement full of dry wood and chemicals. They would all burn. The small orange flame from the lighter flickered in the dark. The man in the grey hat held it close to a pile of dry newspapers. Stop! Mrs. Sterling shouted. You will burn the whole building. The painting might be hidden in here. Then they should come out. The man said calmly. He moved the flame closer. The paper started to turn brown. Smoke began to rise. Alice looked around wildly. She saw a red metal cylinder hanging on the wall next to their hiding spot. A fire extinguisher. She looked at Ben and Sophie. She put a finger to her lips. She pointed to the extinguisher, then to her nose and mouth. "Cover your faces." Ben and Sophie understood. They pulled their shirts up over their noses. Alice reached out slowly. She grabbed the handle of the heavy red bottle. She pulled the metal pin out. The man in the grey hat heard the small sound. He turned his head. What was that? Alice jumped out from behind the crate. "Hey!" she shouted. The man looked at her, surprised. Before he could move, Alice squeezed the handle. A massive cloud of white powder shot out of the nozzle. It hit the man directly in the face. It hit the burning paper. It filled the air like a thick, white snowstorm. "Ah!" The man screamed. He dropped the lighter and the crowbar. He rubbed his eyes. He coughed violently. Mrs. Sterling screamed too. "I can't see. My eyes." The basement was filled with white dust. Visibility was 0. "Now!" Alice yelled. "Run!" Ben and Sophie grabbed the blue lady painting. Alice grabbed the other side. They ran blindly through the white cloud. They could not go to the elevator because the villains were standing near it. They had only one choice. They ran back the way they came, toward the coal room. They stumbled over boxes and kicked aside old chairs. "Get them!" Mrs. Sterling screeched from inside the cloud. "Don't let them escape." Alice reached the heavy wooden door of the coal room. She pulled it open. Inside. "Quick!" Ben and Sophie dragged the painting inside. Alice jumped in after them. She slammed the door shut. She looked for a lock. There was no lock on the inside. "Barricade it!" Ben shouted. He grabbed the heavy wooden table, the fake art studio table. He dragged it in front of the door. Sophie threw the broken chairs on top of the pile. A heavy body hit the door from the outside. The man in the grey hat was there. "Open this door!" he roared. The door shook. The table slid a few inches across the floor. "He is too strong," Sophie cried. "He will break the door down." Alice looked around the small, dusty room. There was the door to the storage room, blocked. There was the stairs to the tunnel, a dead end. Then, she looked up. High on the wall, near the ceiling, was a small, square metal hatch. It was dirty and black. "The coal chute," Alice whispered. "That is where they used to pour the coal in from the street." She pointed up. "That is our way out." The wooden door of the coal room splintered. The man in the grey hat was using the crowbar to smash through the wood. The table barricade slid another inch. "We have 2 minutes," Alice shouted. "Stack the boxes. Build a ladder." Ben and Sophie grabbed the heavy wooden crates from the corner. They put them on top of the art studio table. Alice grabbed a chair and put it on top of the crates. It was a shaky, dangerous tower of furniture. "Ben, you are the tallest," Alice said. "Climb up and open the chute." Ben climbed onto the table. Then he stepped onto the crate. The tower wobbled. "Careful!" Sophie cried. Ben reached up to the ceiling. The small metal door of the coal chute was covered in black soot and cobwebs. It had a simple slide bolt lock. "It is rusty," Ben grunted. He pushed the bolt with his thumb. It did not move. A hand reached through a hole in the wooden door below. The man in the grey hat was trying to push the barricade away. "Hurry, Ben!" Alice yelled. She threw a heavy can of paint at the hole in the door. It hit the man's hand. He roared in pain and pulled his hand back. Up near the ceiling, Ben took his shoe off. He used the hard heel of his boot to hit the rusty bolt. The bolt slid back. Ben pushed the metal door up. It opened with a loud clang. Fresh, cold night air flowed into the dusty room. Rain fell on Ben's face. He looked down. It opens to the back alley. Ben shouted. But it is high. We have to lift the painting. Sophie, get up there with Ben. Alice ordered. I will pass the painting to you. Sophie climbed up the shaky tower. She sat on the edge of the chute opening next to Ben. Okay, Alice. Ben called down. Lift it. Alice grabbed the heavy painting. She was not very tall, but she was strong with adrenaline. She lifted the painting over her head. Her arms shook. Grab it. Ben and Sophie reached down. They grabbed the gold frame. 1, 2, 3, pull. They pulled the painting up through the hole. It scraped against the metal sides. Got it, Ben said. He pushed the painting out onto the wet pavement of the alley. Now you, Alice. Sophie reached her hand down. Alice climbed onto the table. Then the crate. Then the chair. Suddenly, the door below exploded inward. The barricade fell. The man in the grey hat burst into the room. He was covered in white dust, and his eyes were red with fury. He saw Alice on the chair. Come here. He screamed. He lunged at her and grabbed her ankle. Alice kicked hard. Her boot hit him in the shoulder. She jumped up and grabbed Sophie's hand. Ben grabbed Alice's coat. They pulled her up with all their strength. Alice scrambled through the small black tunnel of the chute. She tumbled out onto the wet, cold ground of the alley. Ben slammed the metal hatch shut. He stood on it. A fist hit the metal door from below. But they were out. They were safe. Alice, Ben, and Sophie lay on the wet ground of the alley. The rain poured down on them. It was cold, but they did not care. They were alive. They looked at each other and started to laugh. It was a nervous, tired laugh. Ben was covered in black soot from the coal chute. He looked like a chimney sweeper. Sophie was covered in white powder from the fire extinguisher. She looked like a ghost. Alice was covered in both black and white dust. They were a mess. We look terrible. Sophie giggled, wiping mud from her cheek. But we have her, Ben said. He patted the heavy gold frame of the blue lady. The painting was safe. It sat against the brick wall, wrapped in Alice's coat to protect it from the rain. Shush. Alice whispered. Listen. Inside the museum, the alarm finally started to ring. The smoke from the basement had triggered the fire sensors. The police will be here in 5 minutes. Ben said. We should wait here. Suddenly, the back door of the museum, the same door they entered an hour ago, burst open. Alice grabbed Ben and Sophie. Hide. They scrambled behind a large, smelly metal dumpster full of garbage. They pulled the painting with them. They crouched down in the shadows. 2 figures ran out of the museum door. It was Mrs. Sterling and the man in the grey hat. They did not look for Alice and her friends. They were in a panic. Mrs. Sterling was holding a large leather suitcase. The man in the grey hat was holding his arm, where Alice had hit him with the paint can. Hurry! Mrs. Sterling screamed. The sound of the sirens was getting closer. The police are coming. What about the painting? The man shouted. What about the kids? Forget them. Mrs. Sterling yelled. She ran to the black car parked near the street lamp. She threw the heavy suitcase into the trunk. We have the money from the private accounts. It is enough. We are leaving the country. Where are we going? The man asked, jumping into the driver's seat. The airport. Mrs. Sterling commanded. Private hangar 4. The plane is ready. The car engine roared to life. The tires squealed on the wet pavement. The black car sped away down the dark alley, disappearing around the corner. Alice stood up slowly. She watched the red tail lights vanish. They are escaping, Alice said. Her hands balled into fists. They are going to fly away with millions of dollars of stolen money. Let them go, Sophie said. We have the painting. We won. No, Alice said firmly. They hurt Henry. They framed him. If they escape, Henry might stay in jail forever. We need to catch them. How? Ben asked. We don't have a car, and we can't carry this giant painting to the airport. Alice looked around the alley. She saw her bicycle locked to the fence near the corner. It was just one bicycle. It was not enough. Then, she looked at the painting. She looked at Ben's phone. Ben, call Detective Sharp. Alice ordered. Tell him to come to this alley immediately. Tell him we found the blue lady. And you? Ben asked. Alice ran to her bicycle. She unlocked it with shaking hands. I'm going to follow them. Alice said. I can't catch the car, but I know a shortcut through the park to the highway entrance. If I can see where they go, I can tell the police. Alice, it is dangerous. Sophie cried. Stay with the painting. Alice shouted over her shoulder. She jumped on her bike. Guard it with your life. She pedaled hard. The bicycle tires hissed on the wet road. Alice was not just a student anymore. She was hunting the thieves. Alice pedaled her bicycle harder than she ever had in her life. Her legs burned like fire. Her lungs gasped for air. The rain hit her face like cold needles. But she did not blink. She kept her eyes on the path. She knew the city better than Mrs. Sterling. Mrs. Sterling was a rich woman who always took a car or a taxi. She took the main roads. But Alice was a student. She rode her bike everywhere. She knew the shortcuts. Mrs. Sterling's car had to drive around Central Park to get to the highway. That was a long way, and the traffic lights were slow. Alice could cut straight through the park. Come on, come on. Alice whispered to her bicycle. She turned onto the dark path inside the park. There were no streetlights here. Only the moon shone through the wet trees. The tires slipped on the wet leaves. Alice almost fell, but she balanced herself and kept going. She rode past the fountain where she met Sophie. She rode past the boathouse. The wind howled in the branches above her. It felt like the trees were cheering for her. 10 minutes later, she saw the lights of the city on the other side of the park. She reached the west gate. This gate opened onto the main avenue that led to the highway. Alice stopped her bike. She hid behind a large stone wall and waited. She watched the cars passing by. Please be there. She prayed. She waited 1 minute, 2 minutes. Then, she saw it. The sleek black car with a license plate starting with road. It was stuck behind a slow bus. Mrs. Sterling was honking the horn angrily. Got you, Alice said. She took out her phone. Her fingers were wet and cold, so it was hard to type. She called Ben. Alice. Ben shouted. The police are here. Detective Sharp is looking at the painting. He is in shock. He says it is a masterpiece. Put him on the phone. Alice yelled. There was a pause, and then a gruff voice spoke. This is Sharp. Where are you, kid? I am at the west gate of Central Park. Alice said fast. I see the suspects. They are in a black sedan. License plate road 459. They are turning onto the highway ramp right now. They are going to the airport. The airport. Sharp repeated. Okay. We are on our way. Stay where you are. No. Alice said. The traffic is heavy. If you take the patrol cars, You will get stuck. I am on a bicycle. I can follow them along the service road. I can tell you which gate they enter." Sharp hesitated. "It is dangerous, Alice. They have millions of dollars and they framed Henry." Alice said angrily, "I'm not stopping." She hung up the phone. The black car moved past the bus and accelerated onto the highway ramp. Alice pedaled onto the narrow service path that ran next to the highway. The chase was on. The highway was a river of light and noise. Cars and big trucks roared past Alice. The wind from the trucks pushed her bicycle sideways. It was scary. But Alice did not stop. The service road was a narrow strip of broken pavement next to the highway. It was full of puddles and wet leaves. Alice rode fast, splashing water everywhere. To her left, on the main road, the traffic was terrible. It was Friday night, and everyone was leaving the city. The cars were bumper to bumper. They moved very slowly. Alice looked for the black car. She saw it 50 meters ahead. It was stuck behind a red truck. She saw Mrs. Sterling's hand hitting the steering wheel in frustration. Alice smiled grimly. "My 2 wheels are faster than your 4 wheels tonight," she thought. She pedaled harder. Her legs felt like jelly. Her chest hurt from breathing the cold, exhaust-filled air. But she was gaining on them. She passed the red truck. She passed the black car. She did not look at them. She kept her head down and rode past. She wanted to get ahead of them to see where they exited. 2 kilometers later, she saw a green sign. "Airport. Private aviation. Next right." Alice stopped her bike near the exit ramp. She hid behind a metal barrier. She waited, breathing hard. A minute later, the black car exited the highway. It drove past her, splashing water. It turned right, toward the dark side of the airport. This was not the main terminal for tourists. This was the area for rich people with private planes. Alice got back on her bike. She followed them from a distance. The road here was quiet and dark. There were high wire fences with signs that said, "Restricted Area." She saw the black car stop at a large metal gate. The man in the gray hat rolled down the window. He typed a code into a keypad. The gate opened slowly. The car drove inside and the gate began to close. Alice pedaled with her last bit of energy. She reached the gate just before it closed. She could not ride through it. The camera would see her. Instead, she threw her bicycle into the bushes. She dropped to the ground and rolled under the gate just as it clicked shut. She was inside. She was on the tarmac, the flat ground where planes park. It was very open and windy. In the distance, she saw a large building. A hangar. It had the number 4 painted on the side. A small, white jet plane was parked in front of the hangar. Its engines were starting. The sound was high and loud. The black car stopped near the plane. Mrs. Sterling and the man in the grey hat got out. They ran toward the plane carrying the heavy suitcase of money. Alice took out her phone. She called Detective Sharp again. "I am inside the perimeter," she shouted over the noise of the jet engines. "Hangar 4. They are boarding the plane. Hurry." The noise of the jet engines was deafening. The wind from the turbines blew Alice's hair across her face. She squinted her eyes against the rain and the bright floodlights of the hangar. Mrs. Sterling and the man in the grey hat were running toward the metal stairs of the white plane. The man in the grey hat carried the heavy suitcase. Mrs. Sterling held her coat tight. Alice looked at the gate. No police cars yet. They were too far away. If that plane takes off, Alice thought, they are gone forever. She had to stop them. She had to buy time. Alice stood up from the wet grass. She saw a large metal luggage cart nearby. It was heavy, made of steel, and it had 4 wheels. It was used to carry suitcases to the planes. Alice had an idea. She ran to the cart. She pushed it with all her strength. It was heavy, but the ground was flat concrete. The cart started to roll. Alice aimed the cart at the front wheel of the plane. She pushed it faster and faster. Then, she let go. The cart rolled across the tarmac. It hit the front landing gear of the jet with a loud clang. It wedged itself under the plane's nose. Mrs. Sterling stopped on the stairs. She turned around. She saw the cart. Then, she saw Alice standing in the rain. "You!" Mrs. Sterling screamed. Her face was twisted with hate. "You little rat! Why don't you give up?" "It is over, Mrs. Sterling," Alice shouted. She walked closer, showing she was not afraid. "The police know everything. They know about the fake painting. They know about the insurance fraud." Mrs. Sterling laughed. It was a sharp, crazy sound. "They can't catch us. We are leaving." She turned to the man in the gray hat. "Get on the plane. Tell the pilot to run over the cart. Go." The man in the gray hat threw the suitcase into the plane. He turned to look at Alice. He took a step toward her. He looked dangerous. He wanted to hurt her. Alice took a step back. She looked around for a weapon. She picked up a heavy metal wrench from the ground. "Don't come closer," she warned. Suddenly, a loud siren pierced the air. Blue and red lights flashed at the main gate. The police cars smashed through the metal barrier. 3 police cars raced onto the tarmac. They drove fast toward the plane. Mrs. Sterling saw the lights. She panicked. She grabbed the railing of the stairs. "Forget the girl," she screamed. "Close the door. Take off now." The man in the gray hat jumped onto the stairs. He pushed a button. The electronic stairs began to fold up into the plane. The door started to close. The pilot increased the engine power. The plane shook. It tried to move forward, but the metal luggage cart blocked the wheel. The plane groaned. "Move!" Mrs. Sterling yelled at the pilot through the open cockpit door. "Push it!" The plane lurched forward. The metal cart bent and sparked against the concrete. The plane broke free. It began to taxi slowly. "No!" Alice cried. She ran alongside the plane. "Stop!" But the plane was faster than her. It turned toward the runway. Alice stopped running. She bent over, holding her knees, gasping for air. Her lungs burned. She watched the white jet move away from her. It turned onto the long, dark strip of the main runway. The engines roared louder as the pilot prepared for takeoff. "They are going to escape," Alice cried. "After everything, they are going to win." But then, a police car engine roared behind her. It was Detective Sharp's car. He did not drive toward Alice. He did not drive toward the terminal. Instead, he drove straight onto the runway. He drove incredibly fast, racing parallel to the plane. "What is he doing?" Alice whispered. The police car was faster than the heavy plane on the ground. Sharp drove past the plane's nose. Then, he swerved sharply to the right. The tires smoked. The police car stopped sideways, directly in the middle of the runway. It was a tiny metal block in front of a giant machine. Sharp opened his door and stepped out. He stood in the rain, illuminated by the bright headlights of the oncoming plane. He held up his hand. "Stop." Inside the cockpit, the pilot saw the car. He saw the man. If the pilot continued, he would crush the car and kill the detective, and the collision would probably destroy the plane's landing gear, making takeoff impossible. The pilot made a choice. The sound of the jet engines changed. The pitch dropped. The pilot engaged the reverse thrusters. The plane shuddered. It slowed down. The nose of the plane dipped as the brakes were applied hard. The wheels screeched on the wet asphalt. The plane slid forward, closer to Sharp, closer. It stopped only 10 meters away from the police car. Alice let out a cheer. Yes. 3 other police cars surrounded the plane immediately. Officers jumped out with guns drawn. They aimed at the plane door. Cut the engines. Detective Sharp shouted through a megaphone. His voice was deep and commanding. Open the door. Now. The turbine whine died down slowly. The spinning blades inside the engines stopped. The runway became quiet, except for the rain and the police radios. Alice ran toward the scene. Her legs were heavy, but adrenaline pushed her forward. She wanted to see them caught. She wanted to see justice for old Henry. Slowly, the door of the plane opened again. The stairs unfolded. Mrs. Sterling stood in the doorway. She still held her expensive handbag. She looked at the police cars, then at Detective Sharp standing in the rain. She did not look arrogant anymore. She looked old and defeated. Behind her, the man in the grey hat came out with his hands up. Get down on the ground. The police shouted. Hands behind your heads. Mrs. Sterling walked slowly down the stairs. Her high heels clicked on the metal steps. She stepped onto the wet concrete. A police officer grabbed her arms and put handcuffs on her wrists. You are making a mistake. Mrs. Sterling shouted. I am the museum director. I have friends in the city council. You have the right to remain silent. Detective Sharp said calmly. I suggest you use it. Alice walked up to the police line. She stood next to Detective Sharp. Mrs. Sterling looked up and saw Alice. Her eyes narrowed. You. She hissed. You are just a security guard. A nobody. Alice stood tall. She wiped the rain and soot from her face. She touched the security badge on her chest. I am the security guard who stopped you. Alice said clearly. And my name is Alice. The police cars flashed their lights in the rain. Mrs. Sterling sat in the back of a police car. She looked angry and miserable. The man in the grey hat sat in another car. He looked at the floor, defeated. Detective Sharp walked over to Alice. He looked at her wet clothes and her tired face. He did not look like a grumpy detective anymore. He looked impressed. You rode a bicycle on the highway service road. Sharp said, shaking his head. That was very dangerous, Alice. And very brave. I had to stop them. Alice said, her teeth chattering from the cold. They framed old Henry. He is innocent. I know. Sharp said quietly. I was wrong. I looked at the easy answer. Not the right answer. I am sorry. A police officer walked down the stairs of the plane. He carried the large leather suitcase. He put it on the hood of Sharp's car and opened it. Alice gasped. Inside, there were stacks and stacks of cash. $100 bills. We count $2 million here. The officer said. And we found passports. Fake passports. So? Sharp said, looking at the money. Mrs. Sterling was stealing from the museum funds. She was selling the art and replacing it with cheap copies. And when she ran out of money, she tried to steal the insurance money too. Yes. Alice said. She hired the man in the grey hat. His name is probably on the passport. To steal the blue lady on Tuesday. But they made a mistake. What mistake? Sharp asked. They stole a fake. Alice smiled. The painting that was hanging in the gallery on Tuesday. It was a copy. Mrs. Sterling didn't know it. The real painting was hidden 30 years ago by the old director. Sharp looked confused. Wait. If they stole a fake, where is the real blue lady? It is safe, Alice said proudly. My friends Ben and Sophie are guarding it right now, in the alley behind the museum. Sharp laughed. It was a loud, genuine laugh. You kids are amazing. You solved the crime, found the evidence, and saved the treasure. I think I need to retire. He opened the back door of his car. Get in, Alice. You are shivering. Let's go get your friends. And let's go get that painting. Alice sat in the warm police car. It smelled of coffee and old leather. She watched the airport lights fade away as they drove back to the city. She felt happy. The chase was over. Mrs. Sterling was in handcuffs. The money was recovered. But there was one thing left to do. Detective, Alice asked. Can we call the station? Can we release Henry? Sharp picked up his radio. Dispatch, this is Detective Sharp. Drop all charges against Henry the cleaner. Release him immediately. And tell him his team is coming to pick him up. Alice smiled and closed her eyes. She was exhausted, but it was the best feeling in the world. The police car drove slowly down the narrow alley behind the museum. The headlights cut through the darkness. Alice looked out the window. There they are. She pointed. Ben and Sophie were sitting on the wet pavement. They looked like two lost puppies. They were huddled together under a small roof overhang to stay dry. The large painting, wrapped in Alice's black coat, was between them. Detective Sharp stopped the car. He and Alice got out. Ben stood up quickly. He held a piece of wood like a baseball bat. Stay back, he shouted. It's okay, Ben. Alice called out. It's us. Ben dropped the wood. Alice, you are back. Sophie looked at the detective. She looked terrified. She stepped back into the shadows. Detective Sharp walked up to them. He did not look angry. He looked at the painting. Is this it? Sharp asked. Yes. Ben said. The real one. From the secret vault. Ben carefully removed Alice's wet coat. The gold frame shone in the headlights of the police car. The face of the blue lady was revealed. Even in the dirty alley, surrounded by garbage bins and puddles, the painting had a magical power. The woman's eyes looked calm and sad, as if she knew everything that had happened. Detective Sharp took off his hat. He stared at the painting for a long time. I'm not an art expert, Sharp said softly, but I can see the difference. This is special. It is safe now. Alice said. Mrs. Sterling can't sell it, and the man in the grey hat can't steal it. Sharp turned to Sophie. Sophie started to cry. I am sorry. She sobbed. I helped them. I am a criminal too. Sharp looked at her sternly, but his voice was not harsh. You made bad choices, miss. But tonight, you made the right choice. You helped catch the ringleader, and you protected this painting. He took a notebook from his pocket. You will have to come to the station. You have to answer many questions. But I will tell the judge that you helped us. I think you will be okay. Sophie nodded, wiping her tears. Thank you, detective. 2 other police officers arrived in a van. They carefully picked up the blue lady. They treated it like a sleeping baby. They put it in the back of the van to take it to the police evidence room. A very secure room this time. Okay, Sharp said. He looked at his watch. It is 2 a.m. There is one more thing we need to do tonight. What is that? Ben asked, yawning. We have an old man waiting for us. Sharp smiled. I think he wants a ride home. Alice, Ben, and Sophie smiled. The team was almost complete. Shotgun! Alice shouted, meaning she wanted the front seat. They climbed into the detective's car. They were wet, dirty, and exhausted, but as they drove out of the alley, leaving the dark museum behind, they felt like kings and queens of the city. It was 2:30 a.m. when the group walked into the police station. The station was quiet now. The phones stopped ringing. The lights buzzed softly overhead. Alice, Ben, and Sophie stood near the front desk. They waited impatiently. Finally, a metal door buzzed open. Old Henry walked out. He looked tired. His grey hair was messy, and he held a small plastic bag with his wallet and keys. But when he saw them, his eyes lit up. He stood straighter. "Henry!" Alice cried. She ran and hugged him. "Careful, girl." Henry laughed, patting her back. "I am an old man, not a rugby player." Ben shook Henry's hand. "We missed you, Henry. The museum is not the same without you." Sophie stood back, looking shy. "I am sorry, Henry." She whispered, "I caused this." Henry looked at Sophie. He saw her red eyes and her sad face. He walked over and put a hand on her shoulder. "We all make mistakes, child. The important thing is how we fix them. Alice told me what you did tonight. You did good." Detective Sharp stepped forward. He took off his hat. He looked very serious. "Mr. Higgins," Sharp said, "I owe you an apology. I accused you of a crime you did not commit. I judged you because of your job, not your character. I was wrong." Henry looked at the detective. He nodded slowly. "Apology accepted, detective. But next time, listen to the cleaner. We see everything." They walked out of the station together. The rain had stopped. The air was fresh and clean. "So," Henry asked, "what actually happened?" "I was sitting in a cell all night." Alice explained everything. She told him about the letters from 1985. She told him about the secret vault. She told him how Mrs. Sterling stole the painting on Tuesday to sell it to a black market buyer. But the joke was on her. Alice smiled. She stole the fake painting that Mr. Pendleton hung on the wall 30 years ago. Her buyer realized it was worthless paint. That is why she came back tonight, to find the real treasure. Henry chuckled. Mr. Pendleton. He was a clever man. He knew the world was becoming dangerous for art. Mrs. Sterling confessed in the car. Sharp added, "She has millions of dollars in debt from gambling and bad investments. She was stripping the museum to pay for her lifestyle. She will go to prison for a long time." "And the blue lady?" Henry asked. "She is safe in the police evidence room." Ben said, "She is beautiful, Henry. Truly beautiful." "Good," Henry said. He took a deep breath. "Now, I have one question." Everyone looked at him. "Is there any place open for food?" Henry asked. "I am starving. The police sandwich was terrible." Alice laughed. "Yes. The all-night diner on Main Street. My treat." "No," Sharp said, opening his car door. "My treat. Get in." The all-night diner was bright, warm, and smelled of bacon and maple syrup. It was the perfect place to end a long, dark night. The 5 unlikely friends sat in a red leather booth. Alice sat next to Henry. Ben sat next to Sophie. Detective Sharp sat in a chair at the end of the table. A waitress with a tired smile came over. "What can I get you folks? You look like you fought a war." "We did." Henry smiled. "I will have a stack of blueberry pancakes. And coffee. Black." I want eggs and toast. Ben said. Cheeseburger. Alice said. She was so hungry she could eat the plate. When the food arrived, they ate in silence for a few minutes. It was the best food Alice had ever tasted. The burger was hot and juicy. The fries were salty. After the meal, Detective Sharp wiped his mouth with a napkin. He took a sip of coffee. So, Sharp said, looking at the group, I have to write my report. It is going to be a very strange report. Museum director steals fake painting. Students stop plane with luggage cart. Alice laughed. It sounds like a movie. It is serious. Sharp said, but he smiled. The museum will be a crime scene for a few weeks. It will be closed to the public. What about our jobs? Ben asked. He looked worried. Mrs. Sterling is gone. Who will pay us? The city council will take over. Sharp explained. They will appoint a temporary director, and I will make sure they know who saved the collection. I think your jobs are safe. He looked at Sophie. Sophie, you will have to do community service, and you will be a witness in court against the loan sharks. It will be hard. I am ready. Sophie said quietly. I want to start fresh. No more secrets. Old Henry tapped his fork on the table. The museum needs us. He said. It is not just a building. It is a home for history. Mrs. Sterling treated it like a bank. She only cared about the value of things. She didn't care about the story of things. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out the heavy, rusty iron key. The key to the coal tunnel. He put it on the table. Alice. Henry said. You should keep this. Me? Alice asked. But you are the keeper of the keys. I am old. Henry said. I will retire soon. You have the spirit of the museum in you. You saw the footprints when no one else did. You found the truth. Alice touched the cold iron key. It felt heavy with responsibility. Thank you, Henry. She said. I will keep it safe. Ben raised his glass of orange juice. To the museum. He said. To the blue lady. Sophie added. To the team. Alice said. They clinked their glasses together. Outside the diner window, the sky was turning a light purple color. The sun was coming up. It was Saturday morning. A new day was starting for the city, and for the city museum. 3 weeks passed. The winter turned into spring. The trees in the park were green again, and the flowers were blooming. The city museum was finally ready to open its doors. For 20 days, the museum was a busy place. Police investigators finished their work. Then, a new team came in. They were cleaners, painters, and art experts. They cleaned the floors until they shone like mirrors. They painted the walls a bright, clean white. They fixed the broken window in the Grand Gallery and installed new, high-tech security cameras. It was Friday night, the night of the grand reopening gala. Alice arrived at the museum at 7 p.m. She did not wear her blue security uniform tonight. She wore a beautiful, long black dress. She wore her hair down. She felt nervous but happy. She walked up the stone stairs. The big doors were open. Golden lights spilled out onto the street. Soft classical music played from inside. Violins and cellos. Alice. A voice called. She turned to see Ben. He looked very different. He was not wearing his usual hoodie and jeans. He wore a sharp black suit and a bow tie. He polished his glasses so they sparkled. Wow, Ben. Alice smiled. You look like James Bond. Ben blushed red. And you look like a movie star. Come on, everyone is inside. They entered the main hall. It was full of people. There were rich businessmen, famous artists, and city officials. Waiters walked around with trays of fancy drinks. In the center of the crowd stood old Henry. He wore an old-fashioned tuxedo. It was a little tight, but he looked very proud. He was telling a story to the mayor of the city. "Yes, Mr. Mayor," Henry said, waving his hand. "I fought him off with my mop. Just like a knight with a sword." The mayor laughed and shook Henry's hand. "You are a local hero, Henry." Alice and Ben walked over. Henry hugged them both. "Look at this place," Henry said, looking around the bright hall. "It feels alive again. The shadows are gone." "Where is Sophie?" Alice asked. "Over there." Ben pointed. Sophie was wearing a simple white shirt and black trousers. She was working at the event, handing out programs to the guests. It was part of her community service. When she saw Alice, she waved shyly. She looked tired, but she looked peaceful. She was paying her debt to society, and she was free from the bad men. Suddenly, the music stopped. A spotlight shone on the stage in the center of the room. The mayor walked to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor said, "welcome back to the City Museum. We have had a difficult month. We were betrayed by people we trusted, but we were saved by people with courage." The crowd clapped politely. "Tonight," the mayor continued, "we return the heart of our city to its rightful place. For 30 years, a copy hung on this wall. But tonight, I present to you the true masterpiece." He pointed to the wall of the Grand Gallery. A red velvet curtain covered the painting. "I give you the Blue Lady." 2 workers pulled the cord. The curtain fell. The crowd gasped. There she was. The real painting. Under the new museum lights, the colors were vibrant and deep. The blue dress seemed to ripple like water. The woman's eyes sparkled with life. It was so much better than the fake. It was magic. Alice felt tears in her eyes. She is finally home, she whispered. Ben took Alice's hand. "We did that," he said. "We saved her." The Monday after the party, the City Museum opened to the public. It was a chaotic morning. The line of people went down the stairs and around the block. Everyone wanted to see the famous Blue Lady and the museum that survived the Great Robbery. Alice stood at the staff entrance. She was wearing her security uniform, but it felt different today. She felt proud. "Alice." It was the museum secretary. "The board of directors wants to see you. In the conference room. Now." Alice felt a little nervous. Am I in trouble? She thought. Did I break a rule during the chase? She walked to the conference room on the top floor. She knocked on the heavy wooden door. "Come in," a voice said. Alice entered. Around the long table sat 5 people in suits. The mayor was there. Detective Sharp was there, too. He winked at her. At the head of the table sat Mr. Wright, the interim director. He was a kind-looking man with white hair and round glasses. He was a professor from the university. "Sit down, Alice," Mr. Wright said. Alice sat next to Ben, who was already there. Ben looked excited. "Alice," Mr. Wright began, "we have reviewed the police report. What you did was dangerous, reckless, and broke many safety protocols." Alice looked down at her hands. "I'm sorry, sir. I just wanted to help." Mr. Wright smiled. "However, it was also brilliant. You showed incredible knowledge of the museum, quick thinking, and bravery. You saved a national treasure." The mayor nodded. "The city is very grateful." We think you are wasting your talent standing at the door checking tickets. Mr. Wright said, "We know you are an art history student. We looked at your university grades. They are excellent." He slid a piece of paper across the table. "Alice, we would like to offer you a new position. We want you to be the museum's new junior curator." Alice gasped. "Junior curator? But I haven't graduated yet." "It is a part-time position while you finish your degree." Mr. Wright explained. "You will help manage the collection, research the history of the art, and design new exhibits. And, of course, the salary is much higher than a security guard." Alice read the paper. It was her dream job. She would not just protect the art. She would study it and teach people about it. I accept," Alice said. "Thank you so much. And Ben?" Mr. Wright turned to him. "We are upgrading the entire security system. We want you to be the head of technology and security. You will have a full team to manage. No more sleeping in the break room." Ben grinned. "I promise, sir. No hackers will ever get in again." "What about Henry?" Alice asked. "Henry has decided to retire," the mayor said. "The city gave him a very generous pension. He will never have to worry about money again. And we are naming the staff garden the Henry Higgins Garden in his honor." Alice smiled. It was perfect. The bad guys were gone, and the good guys had won. "Congratulations, junior curator," Detective Sharp said, shaking her hand. Alice walked out of the room holding her contract. She was not just a student anymore. She was part of the museum's future. It was a warm, sunny Saturday in July. The city was full of life. The trees in the park were green, and birds sang loudly. Inside the City Museum, the air was cool and peaceful. Alice stood in the Grand Gallery. She was not wearing her security guard uniform anymore. Today, she wore a smart grey blazer and held a tablet computer. She was leading a group of school children. "And this," Alice said, pointing to the wall, "is our most famous painting, The Blue Lady." The children looked up with big eyes. "Is it real?" a small boy asked. Alice smiled. She touched the small golden pin on her jacket. It was a tiny lion, a gift from the new director. "Yes," Alice said. "It is very real. It has a long and exciting history. It was lost, and then it was found." The children moved on to the next room. Alice stayed behind for a moment. She looked at the woman in the painting. The Blue Lady looked calm and safe. The heavy glass case around her was new and very strong. "All clear?" a voice asked. Alice turned. Ben stood there. He held a high-tech security tablet. He looked professional in his suit, though his tie was a little crooked. "All clear, Chief of Security." Alice joked. "The new sensors are working perfectly." Ben said, "Nobody can touch a painting without me knowing. Not even a fly." "Good," Alice said. Just then, the front doors opened. A man walked in. He wore a bright yellow shirt with palm trees on it, shorts, and sunglasses. He looked like a tourist on holiday. It was old Henry. "Henry," Alice and Ben said together. Henry took off his sunglasses. He looked 10 years younger. His face was tan, and he was smiling broadly. "Hello, my friends." Henry beamed. "I was in the neighborhood. I wanted to check on my museum." "It looks great, Henry," Alice said. "Come, let me show you the new exhibit." They walked through the halls together. They walked past the Egyptian mummies and the Roman statues. They walked to the back of the building, to the staff garden. There, a new wooden bench stood under a large oak tree. A small brass plaque on the bench said, "The Henry Higgins Garden." Henry touched the plaque. His eyes were misty. "This is too much." He whispered, "I was just a cleaner. You were the guardian." Alice said softly, "You saved everything." They sat on the bench in the sun. They talked about Sophie, who was finishing her community service and studying to be a nurse. They talked about Mrs. Sterling, who was in prison. They talked about the crazy night in the tunnel. "It feels like a dream now." Ben said, "It was an adventure." Henry said, "But I am glad it is over. I like my quiet life." He looked at Alice. "Do you still have it?" Alice nodded. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out the heavy, rusty iron key. The key to the coal tunnel. The key to the secret history of the museum. "I keep it with me every day." Alice said, "Good." Henry said, "The museum has a new guardian now. You have the eyes to see the truth, Alice." Alice looked at the key, then at the museum building rising above them. It was a castle of stone and art. It held thousands of stories, and she knew them all. She put the key back in her pocket. She stood up and smiled at her friends. "Come on." Alice said, "I have work to do. There are new mysteries to solve in the archives." Ben and Henry laughed. They followed her back inside. The doors of the museum closed softly behind them, protecting the treasures within. The mystery was solved, but the story of the City Museum would go on forever.